Ready to start?
Yep, we're live.
All right, we're live and in person and online. Except I need my notes.
How bad can the appropriations be?
Welcome to the Appropriations Committee hearing. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood and represent Legislative District 2, which is Cass County in eastern Lancaster. I serve as chair of this committee. We'll start off by having members do self-introductions, starting with my far right.
Myron Dorn from District 30.
Robert Dover, District 19.
Mike McDonald, LD5, South Omaha.
Anna Wishart, District 27, which is West Lincoln in Lancaster County.
Lauren Lippincott, District 34.
Steve Erdman, District 47.
Assisting the committee today is Tamara Hunt, our committee clerk. To my left is our fiscal analyst, Clint Bernard. And our pages today, we have Malcolm from Omaha, a UNL student, and we're going to have Logan coming in also. At each entrance, you'll find green testifier sheets. If you're planning on testifying today, please fill out a green testifier sheet and hand it to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. If you will not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white sign-in sheets at each entrance where you may leave your name and other pertinent information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones, electronic devices. Move to the front chairs when you're ready to testify. The order of testimony for bills will be introducer, proponent, opponent, neutral, and closing. When we hear testimony regarding agencies, we will first hear from a representative of the agency. Then we will hear testimony from anyone who wishes to speak on the agency's budget request. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes or less. Written materials may be distributed to the committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies now, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. And now we'll begin today's hearing with Agency 29, Department of Natural Resources budget hearing. Welcome, Director. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman. And happy Pi Day. I'm jealous of Chairman Clement's tie, which has the pi symbol on it. So
3.14,
that's right, 314.
etc.
So, and excuse me, my allergies are starting to get to me, so I might need to stop for a drink of water. It takes away my voice sometimes.
All right.
So thanks for having me. I am Tom Riley, TOM RILEY, Director of the Department of Natural Resources. And thanks for the opportunity to allow me to comment on the FY 23-25 agency budget request. First, let me begin by expressing my full support for the governor's budget recommendation. I'll be providing you some additional information to fill in gaps that can address differences between the governor's budget and the Appropriation Committee's preliminary budget recommendations. Start, let me give some general background on our agency. The department has broad responsibilities for the areas of surface water, groundwater well registration, integrated water management, natural resources planning, floodplain management, and dam safety. These also include a duty to collect, develop, and consolidate, maintain, and disseminate natural resources data as a basis for coordinated efforts with state, local, and federal government entities, as well as the general public. So for that, think stream gauges, ice data, aerial imagery, those kind of components, irrigated acres, those kind of pieces, just to name a few. The committee's decision to allow for reappropriation authority for subprograms 19, 20, 21, and 24 is critical in allowing the department to manage large projects that span multiple years. In the previous biennium, only programs 19, 20, and 21 were allowed for reappropriation in program 334. Subprogram 24 was created in FY23 to house the Surface Water Irrigation and Infrastructure Fund. I will highlight later in my testimony the department currently has numerous commitments in progress which rely on the continued availability of these previously appropriated funds. In recognition of the long-term nature of these efforts, past appropriations committees have included specific language to provide a reappropriation for these unexpended funds. So one example of these long-term and complex projects is the department's work coordinating along with the state's natural resource districts in fully and over appropriated basins. Nebraska's commitment to support compliance activities with interstate compacts, decrees, and formal state agreements. The Water Resources Cash Fund, or WRCF, in subprogram 20 was created in 2007 to support these efforts. While the funding sources and amounts have varied over time, our FY 24-25 request seeks to transfer $7 million annually from the Nebraska Environmental Trust, or Trust, to leverage this historically underutilized fund balance in the trust, while continuing to fulfill Nebraska's interstate water obligations and working to conserve, enhance, and restore natural environments in these water-challenged basins. Estimates show that the trust has an unobligated balance of roughly $20 million. Without this transfer, all the statutory funding authority for the Water Resources Cash Fund expires at the end of FY23. The funding still remains critical, and it's best evidenced by the $20 million in current commitments and additional $19 million in planned commitments to fund specific projects identified in the department's October 22 report to the legislature. Additionally, these WRCF funds are often leveraged with local financial contributions and federal funding that would exceed the minimum matching requirements of the trust. The department is requesting the committee to modify its preliminary recommendations and include this important cash fund transfer along with the increase in appropriation into its final budget. So turning to other portions of the budget, the department's highest priority activities continue to focus on the administration of interstate water compacts, decrees, and agreements, and the management of statewide water resources. Currently, all 23 of our natural resource districts across the state have completed or are in the process of finalizing a joint integrated management plan, or an IMP. These are in partnership with the department. Additionally, multiple basin-wide plans and drought planning efforts that are underway to develop coordinating principles for sharing water resources across broad areas of the state. The funding from subprograms 19 and 21 within program 334 are used to support the development and implementation of these plans. Reappropriation of the funds in these two subprograms is critical for those efforts. The department is also requesting a reappropriation of $49.9 million of funds in each of the fiscal years 24 and 25 for the Surface Water Irrigation Infrastructure Fund in subprogram 24. The remaining approximately $100,000 was for a new position to manage this program identified in the agency's fiscal note on Legislative Bill 1074 from the 107th session. This reappropriation is necessary to continue dispersal of money from this new fund that was identified as the state aid established in LB 1011E in 2022. Money from the fund is used to support grants to eligible irrigation projects for critical irrigation infrastructure. The department's administration of the fund is proceeding with over $11 million already obligated to eligible irrigation districts. So as a reminder, this is the grant program that provides for irrigation districts, and there's about 60 of them in the state, $9 to every $1 they put in. So that's that program. Also included within the governor's budget recommendation is a request for $1.2 million of American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA dollars, in each of the fiscal year 24-25 for data collection and enhancement. This request for ARPA funding does not require redistribution of previously allocated ARPA funds, as there were some projects deemed ineligible. This investment in data will assist enhancing decision-making regarding drought, floodplain management, dam safety, and other important water resources issues that impact all Nebraskans. Additionally, the department will seek to leverage these dollars with other cost-share sources to increase the program impact. So this connects back with our mission of collecting data and providing that to the other states' data needs. Funded through Program 319 water projects, the department has several new water initiatives it's advancing as a result of a past legislative session. These include $20 million in ARPA funding dedicated to the use of the city of Lincoln for supporting its second source initiative, $100 million dedicated to the activities associated in implementing the Jobs and Economic Development Initiative, aka JEDI, and $53.5 million to support advancement of the Perkins County Canal Project Act. Included in the governor's recommendation was $75 million, is a $75 million reduction in the department's base of $100 million annual appropriation for the Star Wars Jedi to $25 million for each of the fiscal years 24 and 25. This reduction establishes a base appropriation which will allow for sufficient expenditures each fiscal year. The department asked the committee to adopt the governor's recommended reduction. The governor's recommendation also included $9.3 million, an increase to the Perkins County Canal Cash Fund base appropriation that would take it to $62.8 million in fiscal year 24 and 25. Without the increase in this appropriation, this will likely limit the department's ability to advance a project in the biennium, thus unnecessarily slowing the project's development. The department requests that the committee consider the documentation that's been provided through its report filed in December of 2022. This is our independent study report that demonstrates the critical need for the project and the cost benefits associated with it. Please recall that constructing the canal is a prerequisite for Nebraska to protect its full benefits agreed to with the compact was signed and ratified. Toward that objective, the department supports provisions of LB 818, which would remove the current limitations on using funds for land purchases and align the uses of the funding with the authorities that were established in the Perkins County Canal Project Act. These changes will allow the state more flexibility and will enhance the speed of the project development. In addition, the department supports LB 819's transfer of $574.5 million from the cash reserve fund to the Perkins County Canal Project Fund. This would give the department $628 million identified in the independent report, which was developed at the direction of the legislature to complete the canal and the reservoir system. In closing, I fully support the governor's recommendations, including the reappropriations of specific unexpended appropriation balances as of June 30, 2023 for programs 304, 306, 307, 309, 314, and 313 aid programs, as well as subprograms 19, 20, 21, and 24 within program 334. I would also request the committee reconsider its preliminary budget recommendations and align its final budget with the recommendations provided to you in the governor's budget. So I just want to thank you and your colleagues for really recognizing the importance of water. It's the backbone of our economy. It's a backbone for our way of life and our future. And I know we really appreciate that. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. First of all, look at my tie.
Nice.
See that? You mentioned his, but not mine. But on a serious note, how did the infrastructure, the Surface Water Infrastructure Act, how's that working? Are people making applications?
So the question is about the Surface Water Infrastructure Fund, and I think it's going pretty well. We've already established about $11 million of commitments. Some of these contracted, some are under construction. Assistant Director Bradley is out today working with a few irrigation districts, and next week we're going to be visiting some more. So I think it's going well. We're really trying to push hard on that. That program is all about finding that piece that affects a district that fails today, they can't deliver tomorrow. That's been our focus. And I think it's rolling out really well, Senator.
The Whitney Irrigation District made an application, and I think they've been approved. Is that, familiar with that?
Yeah, I know we've looked at Whitney's, and I think that is one that we already have either contracted with or in the process of.
Yeah, they sent me a note on that. I believe that to be the case.
So, some of these irrigation districts, they're smaller, and it's still a big lift for them even to have the 1% or the 10% match. But the one thing that we've really worked hard is to make sure that we get the money out to them as they get their materials in, and they don't have to float these projects themselves.
Do you have an update on the Gearing-Fort Laramie tunnel?
Yeah, so the latest I have on Gearing-Fort Laramie, and if you'll recall that there's $23.1 million out of ARPA funding that was set aside for that. They're in the process of final design, working with the Bureau to get all their check marks. I've not checked in with the manager here in a bit, but I know that I've not heard anything that's slowing them down that wouldn't be able to allow them to get that design done and the completion of that done before the ARPA rules. So it moves forward.
Yeah, 2 more years to get that done.
I think that sounds about right based on the last information I had.
So Wyoming has made a commitment for their 23 million.
So that, Senator, I don't have a total answer on. I'll get it for you. I know there's been some wavering on how they're doing that in their state, but I know we're set and ready to go. I'll get back to you on where they're at.
Well, their commitment, about a month after that collapse, I had a conference call with Senator Steinmetz in Torrington, and we had Governor Wyoming on the phone, and he committed to me that day that if we got our half, he'd get theirs. He wasn't sure how they were going to do it, and they're trying to work ARPA funds, but I'm not sure they've gotten that figured out over there.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're as far along as this legislature on getting through
I
those
agree.
things. The other thing of note is the Bureau of Reclamation has provided some additional funding to both districts, $5 million each to help with the project as well.
In my opinion, the Bureau should have paid for it all.
I'll have to stay mum on that and we can talk later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Lippincott?
What's the status with the Oglala Aquifer groundwater? From the farmers where I'm from, they say they've never seen the groundwater so low. Lakes are empty, some streams are dried up.
So this will be my professional opining here. So we're really blessed as a state to have that water resources within our state boundaries. I think if you look at a year like last year, a really dry year, a difficult year for a lot of producers, the advantage it gives us is we were able to still access that water and use it on crop production. And while there likely would be some temporary reductions, most of those bounce back, depending on where you're at in the state. There's still areas where there's higher groundwater than there was before, but I don't disagree with you that some of these areas, including around Senator Clements and my stomping grounds now, some of the ponds are really, really low. I've never seen them that low myself, but they're starting to bounce back now. We have to hope that we get the continued precip that we've seen and that trend continues. But again, we're fortunate to be able to have access to that water, especially from our production side, to be able to use it in times when it's dry.
Also nitrates in the water. Can you address that?
So that's sister agency, Department of Energy and Environment. We're the quantity people. So, I mean, we certainly keep our eye on it. Quantity and quality are sometimes tied together, especially in stream flow. Those waters go to helping make sure there's recharge in the local aquifers, and it certainly can have an impact on those kind of contaminants.
Other questions? Regarding the surface water projects, that was a bill from Senator Bostelman, right?
That's correct.
And
That was
would
Senator
you,
Wilson's.
we have some new committee members. Would you discuss how many of those are and why we were doing that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So there's about 60 irrigation districts, canal companies across the state. Many of them are in the west, right? The 100 Meridian, Cozad on. That's where a lot of these are. And many of them are 100 years old or older. So the infrastructure is getting to a point where it needs some help. And these are important projects in our state's water portfolio. So Senator Bostelman's bill provided for a grant program to those districts that really focused on their critical infrastructure. And you heard me say earlier, that really means if it fails today, you can't irrigate tomorrow. And sometimes those projects just don't have an impact on their district, kind of rolls downhill. The return flows from those projects affect the next project downstream. So it's a really complicated system, and it's one that we need to continue to support. And that particular bill provides a grant program that gives $9 for every $1 the district puts against it. It's $50 million. Again, we've got about $8 million or $11 million already obligated. I suspect by the end of the year, we'll have much more of that obligated. We're trying to make sure we have for bigger projects, some of that money held back, hoping to leverage that against other federal dollars, which takes a little bit more planning and time. And in the end, I know my hope is we could turn that $50 million into 70, 75, if we can leverage into some of these federal dollars. So that's what we're trying to do with
And
that.
the users of that water do pay a fee for the water, but the fee was not adequate to pay for reconstruction. Is that it?
I think that's a good way to describe where some of those are at on their operation and maintenance fees. They just don't have the monies available to be able to really correct some of these bigger infrastructure components, which today's world can be complicated and costly.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Dorn?
Is there a plan going forward that more fees will be collected so they can have the resource available to them when they'll need it?
So I'm not certain how any of those individual districts are really setting their rate structure and collecting some of that money. So I don't have a good answer for you there.
Ultimately, who are they accountable to?
So most of those districts, and they range in different size. Some of them were districts set up by federal government projects. Think of the Bureau of Reclamation projects. Some of them can be quite small, where they're only serving a few thousand acres. It might be a couple families is how it started out. So the range of fees that they charge for accessing that water and then maintaining the system varies widely within those districts.
All right. Any other questions, Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. So just for a clarification point, we don't pay for water. We pay for the O&M, operation and maintenance of the ditch. So water is not what we're paying for. We're paying for the operation to deliver the water. So that's what it is. So we don't buy water.
Yep, so they can access water. Some of the Bureau projects have the cost per acre foot, but it is accessing the water is what goes to the O&M side to keep the systems.
Other questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Director.
All right, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And again, the committee and your colleagues' recognition of the importance of water in our state. Thank you.
Now we'll invite other people who would like to speak to the Department of Natural Resources budget request. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Devin Brundage, DevinBrundage. I live in Gothenburg, Nebraska. I'm the general manager for the Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District, and here to testify today on behalf of Central and our regional stakeholders in support of the appropriations for the Department of Natural Resources with regard to the South Platte Canal and Reservoir, Perkins County Canal for what it's kind of known as locally. The Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District is the largest hydropower producer and irrigation water provider in Nebraska, generating on average more than 250,000 megawatt hours of carbon-free hydropower and delivering water directly to over 100,000 acres of irrigated farmland each year. Additionally, the district, through our infrastructure and with our partners, provide primary storage for surface water to 12 other irrigation and power canal systems water-based recreation at more than 20 reservoirs, a cooling water supply for MPPD's largest power generating station, Gerald Gentleman near Sutherland, groundwater recharge for the benefit of water users in the Platte and even the Republican River basins, as well as enhancement to our environment and water flows in the Central and Lower Platte River Valley. These benefits form the foundation for hundreds of millions of dollars of economic activity for our region and the state annually. Many Nebraskans are probably likely familiar with the key to this list of impressive benefits. Central's Lake McConaughey, the largest reservoir in Nebraska, which at full pool holds over 1.7 million acre feet of water. An odd unit, but if you take that and think about it, it's the water contained, more than the water contained in all of the rest of Nebraska's reservoirs combined. Or if you were able to put a fence around the city of Lincoln, it would fill the city to a depth of 27 feet. So a lot of water. The South Platte River plays a valuable role in providing the many benefits that we mentioned here. The South Platte River provides a base of natural flow that Lake McConaughey releases to supplement. Unfortunately, for every acre foot of water that cannot be utilized from the South Platte River, an additional acre foot of water must be released from Lake McConaughey to make up for that. There's an estimated 300,000 acre feet that could be lost if our rights are not exercised under our compact with Colorado. This is a significant amount of water, being equivalent to filling Lake McConaughey every 5 to 6 years. As large as it is, Lake McConaughey relies on those South Platte flows that are currently coming into Nebraska today as part of a sustainable water supply to meet Nebraska's downstream needs. Really, the opportunity in front of us today is to take a page from some Nebraska visionaries who planned our today nearly a century ago. The infrastructure they put in place in the 1930s serves Nebraskans today in more ways than they would have even imagined. From irrigation to power production, from reservoir storage to groundwater recharge, from recreational vistas and environmental enhancement to municipal well fields. Most importantly, it has brought an extraordinary economic prosperity possibility to Nebraska. The opportunity is not only for us to secure that water for Nebraska, but to have a vision like our ancestors to build the infrastructure for our children of 100 years from now. Our predecessors understood the construction of the reservoirs they envisioned would benefit the state for many, many years to come. I would imagine they might even smile a bit if they understood that the projects that they constructed then now return 25 times their construction costs and economic activity annually. We owe a debt of gratitude to the foresight by those who came before us to include a provision for a canal and reservoir to bring this important South Platte water out of Colorado for use in Nebraska. Continuing to bring their vision to fruition might just be the best of the things we could provide. For these reasons, Central supports the full appropriation for the South Platte Canal and Reservoir projects to ensure preservation of Nebraska's rights to the South Platte water and the creation of the infrastructure that will maximize the value of our state's water for decades to come. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Further questions from the committee? Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for being here today. Do you happen to know, last summer we were getting low in the Lake McConaughey. Do you happen to know where we're at and how that will affect the irrigation season?
There are no allocations planned for our coming year. We have rebounded back up to about 50% as of today, reservoir capacity.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, everyone.
Others who'd like to testify regarding the budget for the Natural Resources Department? Welcome.
Thank you. Chairman Clemens, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Kent Miller, Kentmiller. I am General Manager of the Twin Platte Natural Resources District with offices in North Platte. I am testifying today for the Twin Platte Natural Resource District, for the Nebraska Association of Resources District, and for regional stakeholders. I am testifying in support of funding for the Perkins County Canal and the governor's budget recommendation that includes a transfer of $574.5 million from the cash reserve for the full construction costs of the project and the $62.8 million annual appropriation to ensure the project can proceed in a timely fashion. For the last 40 years, beginning in the 1980s, I have been promoting that Nebraska must utilize provisions of Article 6 in the South Compact and build the Perkins County Canal. And finally, Governor Ricketts brought that forward last year. The majority of the South Platte River in Nebraska is within the Twin Platte Natural Resource District. I have been observing the developments occurring on the Front Range of Colorado and their desperate need for water. I enthusiastically applaud and thank Governor Ricketts for proposing building the Perkins County Canal in 2022. And I thank Governor Pillen for supporting and providing funding in his budget for the Perkins County Canal project. This is the right time, and Nebraska cannot wait any longer. It is essential to the economic prosperity, health, and welfare of the people of the state of Nebraska and to the environmental health of the entire Platte River Basin across Nebraska to protect Nebraska's full entitlement to the flows of the South Platte River as provided for in the South Platte Compact. I have heard time and time again from folks at conferences in Colorado and in conversations with folks in Colorado. Colorado's plan is to not allow any more South Platte River water than is required in the South Platte River Compact to flow into Nebraska. And provisions in the South Platte River Compact. The Twin Platte Natural Resource District has extensive requirements in our integrated management plan required by the legislature in 2004 for conjunctive management of groundwater and surface water for the over-appropriated Upper Platte River Basin in Nebraska. These regulatory burdens will increase if South Platte River flows in Nebraska continue to decrease. Nebraskans 100 years ago agreed with Colorado and the U.S. Congress, and the South Platte River Compact was always time to provide the funding and build this infrastructure that will benefit Nebraskans for generations to come. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Are there other testifiers regarding the natural resources budget? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Nick Simonson, Nick-Simonson, and I'm presenting testimony in support of the Department of Natural Resources Agency, specifically the Water Resources Cash Fund, on behalf of the Lower Republican Natural Resources District and the Nebraska Association of Resource Districts. I am the Assistant Manager at the LRNRD in Alma, Nebraska. The fund is used by the NRDs located within the Nebraska river basins that are designated fully or over appropriated. This is a great opportunity for the legislature to increase the funding in this program. The fund does not allow for administrative or personnel costs to be included by the recipient or the agency. For the NRDs to access funding, we must have an integrated management plan developed in conjunction with the Department of Natural Resources. These are holistic, multifaceted approaches to the management of water resources, both groundwater and surface water. This ensures that a project will not only benefit one area or a specific group of water users, but enhance the sustainability of all water throughout the NRD and the basin. The fund has been used to increase stream flows and groundwater supplies throughout the Platte, Republican, and Upper Niobrara White basins. Many contracts are an agreement between a water management agency and the department, normally a 60% DNR, 40% water manager split, but it can also be used as local match for a federal grant. The LRNRD was awarded $2 million through the Bureau of Reclamation's Water Smart program, which requires a 50% minimum non-federal match. We were able to leverage our fund dollars along with NRD dollars to come up with $2.3 million for the local match, which will be paired with the $2 million from the Bureau. $1.2 million was fund money and the remainder is NRD money. This project allows us to replace about 1/3 or 1,000 of our flow meters with telemetry enabled meters that will provide near real-time water use data to our irrigators. We estimate that this will provide for a reduction in pumping of about 4,000 acre feet of groundwater, or about 50 pivot irrigation systems worth of water saved annually. The Middle Republican NRD has been successful in securing 2 Bureau grants for the same type of project and replaced over 1,500 meters in their district. With the financial assistance from the fund, the Central Platte NRD worked with 4 irrigation districts to rehabilitate canals and improve efficiency of water use, and also use the canals in the off-season to benefit groundwater recharge when there are excess flows. They have been credited with over 40,000 acre feet of recharge to the Platte River. This improves flows in the Platte to help Nebraska reach its goals for the Platte River Recovery Implementation Program to protect endangered species and their habitat. The state of Nebraska joined the program with Wyoming, Colorado, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, water users, and environmental groups to work collaboratively to improve and maintain the associated habitats for the designated species. The program is intended to address the concerns including loss of habitat in central Nebraska by managing key land and water resources in the Central Platte region and in the process avoiding harm to the lower Platte River stretch. Tri-Basin NRD, the Rainwater Basin Joint Venture, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District partnered to provide diversion of excess flows into 5 waterfowl production area wetland complexes to enhance critical habitat for migratory birds and other wildlife. It provides a savings of over, endangered species within the rainwater basin. The Upper Republican NRD has used the fund to incentivize re-enrollment of over 2,800 acres in the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which provides for the conversion of marginal irrigated cropland back to native grassland for upland game species and other wildlife. It provides for savings of over 1,700 acre feet of water annually. The 2 largest irrigation districts on the Republican River have utilized the fund along with Bureau money to install automated gates across large sections of their canals. This allows them to better time the deliveries of water on these canals for the irrigators. This technology saves up to 6,000 acre feet of water per year, according to their estimates. The efficiency allows for water to remain in the reservoirs, which benefits the fisheries and waterfowl. The ability to have funds available for projects that need to be implemented during certain weather cycles is of paramount importance to water managers and water users alike. If the fund were simply run like many federal programs that have discretionary funds available for a short window of time, it would not be nearly as effective. The fund provides the department the ability to provide letters of commitment for local match in terms of leveraging federal monies. Without that guarantee, those federal dollars would often be left on the table or sent to another state. The fund is a critical tool for the state's water managers in areas where climate variability has always made that job extremely challenging. I would ask the committee to support the governor's request to increase the funding in the Water Resources Cash Fund to help the state protect its #1 natural resource. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today and would welcome any questions.
Are there questions? I had one. Yesterday, we had Department of Environment and Energy talking about doing a study with nitrates around the state. And see, you're representing the Association of Resource Districts. Do those districts have any records of nitrate levels around the state?
In our district, we measure wells every year for nitrate levels, and we have between 120 and 150 irrigation wells that we measure. That's not always the same well every year unless they're in a special management area. We do have one special management area in our district alone that we measure quarterly for nitrate levels. And so if we do have areas that we see that may have higher levels in them, that hot spots is what we call them, we'll go back to those areas and maybe pick out some more wells and measure them more often. And so that's what we do for those irrigation wells. And then we provide for one nitrate test annually for any domestic water user that isn't on a municipal system.
Do you aggregate those among all the districts to come up with a report statewide?
There's a clearinghouse that we submit our results to. When we get them back, we submit them to the clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse aggregates them, I guess, for us. And then that report is put out as a annual water quality report.
All right, well, we're looking for ways to have that done without creating a completely new program. We might refer that to DEE.
Okay.
Thank you for testimony.
Yeah.
Other testifiers regarding Department of Natural Resources budget.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name, I'm going to give my name. It was given to me by a Pawnee elder several years ago. It is Nebraska Eagle Water, Nebraska Eaglewater. Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you, Senators, for the hours dedicated to the service of our state and showing up to work in Lincoln, Nebraska on a daily basis. I have been visiting the Capitol for over 20 years. Today, I sit before you to offer neutral testimony on Agency 29, the Department of Natural Resources. First, I'd like to formally request an additional $1 million from the Nebraska state budget be allocated to form a new department that guides and collaborates action, money, and research within the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources. Second, the newly created government body shall be called Nebraska Regenerative Ag. And its overarching goal will be managing the current conservation organizations throughout Nebraska and ensuring everyone is singing from the same sheet of music, as Senator Brewer recently stated during a committee hearing. The Nebraska Regenerative Ag Department within the DNR would act as financial oversight for the Nature Conservancy, Platte River Recovery Implementation Program, Rose Sanctuary, Rainwater Basin Joint Venture, the Crane Trust, Nebraska State Board of Educational Lands and Funds, and critical resources within the NRD districts that serve as state treasures of wildlife and abundance for all Nebraskans. Money would be utilized for planting native grasses, cover crops, switchgrass, muslin seed mixes to feed Nebraskans. Muslin seed crops are like rye, millet, milo. In Africa and other countries, they plant all those in one long strip, they harvest them, and they make bread out of them. My suggestion, if this passes, we make bread for the homeless. As well as aquifer and surface water, planning to ensure a healthy balance of state resources for future generations and our children's children. Finally, yesterday was Monday, and I stood beside the Platte River. I was a quarter mile from it, and it's an area that I've been documenting for over 10 years. This is a book, but I doubt you've seen it yet, but this is 10 years of research of the Platte River. And I was standing there talking to this gentleman. He was sowing, broadcasting native grasses, and we talked for about 30 minutes as these cranes, there was probably 40,000 cranes in the air, and we're a quarter mile from the Platte River, we're talking, and he tells me the logistics and the history of what conservation is in Nebraska, who the leaders have been for the last 30 years, the structure of where money's going, and that was the impetus for suggesting that we do the Nebraska Regenerative Ag, because that man was being paid $40,000 by one of these organizations to plant native grass seeds. That's $500 for 80 acres. That's $40,000. I'm also a farmer. There are some times when I only make $20,000 a year farming because of drought, because of hail, because of all these reasons. One of these organizations that I listed as a conservation organization was paying $40,000 to broadcast seed out there. This is why I feel there needs to be financial oversight of all conservation organizations in Nebraska. I'm going to continue that argument by showing you a quick picture here. During my research of the Platte River, this heavy equipment right here was actually leaking diesel fuel. I put a pop can underneath of it, and I measured the amount of drips that were falling out. And I did the math, and it was 60 gallons of diesel fuel leaked into the Platte River by these conservation organizations that hired this work done. one final comment as my time is running out. We also spray things that I'm not so sure we should be within the Platte River. And I think that if we were to choose the Nebraska Regenerative Ag, focus on Nebraska Regenerative Ag, there's just so many possibilities. Finally, Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District is currently going through a lawsuit. J2 hydroelectric facility is the crown jewel of Nebraska. It is being underutilized currently. You could be making more megawatts of electricity there, but it's not being utilized. I talked to the guy there. With that, I conclude my testimony, and I welcome any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank
your
you for your time.
testimony. Are there other testifiers regarding the Department of Natural Resources budget? Seeing none, we have position comments for the record. We have 2 proponents, no opponents, and no one in the neutral. And that concludes Agency 29. We'll now switch to bill hearings, starting with LB 125. We need to get our other notebooks out. All right, we'll open the hearing for LB 125. Senator Bostelman, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and the members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Bruce Bostelman. I spell it Bruce-Bostelman. I represent Legislative District 23. I'm here today to introduce LB 125. LB 125 is a cleanup bill, which would allow the Surface Water Irrigation Fund to accrue interest. Last year, the legislature created the Surface Water Irrigation Infrastructure Fund and authorized a one-time transfer of $50 million to the fund. However, the interest accrued by this fund is being credited to the general fund. The bill asks is that the accrued amount goes into the Surface Water Irrigation Fund. With that, I'll appreciate any questions you may have.
Any questions? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Torrance. Thank you for being here. It looks like by the fiscal note, that was approximately $829,000 last year.
From the 50 million, right? Yeah, from the 50 million that was originally, yeah.
Other questions? And this is the fund that we were talking to the director about, correct?
Correct. So the fund got set up, take a LR 117 was what we looked at. There's over $150 million in needs out there. We set up the $50 million transfer to set this up. It's used by really the small users out there, the ones that really don't have the funding. They have 10% match. And this really gives them the opportunity to know, to work, on repairing the facilities they have, gives them encouragement to that and gets them down the road a little further.
Do you think it looks like the fund is going to be utilized?
It's being utilized very well right now. So yes, that's very much appreciated.
Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you, Senator Bosman. My people appreciate what you did. And I don't know if they thanked you for it, but I will. So would it be standard language? They just missed this when they put this together last year?
It was in the bill. Actually, when it got put into the budget, it was left off. So I did have it in the bill. However, we caught that this year that it did get left off. So we're just asking for it to be placed in there as we requested last year.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there proponents for LB 125?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon.
I've got copies of the testimony coming around. It's one page and you can flip over and see on the back. We tried to conserve a little bit of paper. Good afternoon, committee members and guests. My name is Scott Snell, and that's spelled Scottsnell. And I'm a board member of the Nebraska State Irrigation Association, whom I will be representing today in my testimony in support of LB 125. The association is a nonprofit organization representing the interests of surface water irrigators. First, the Nebraska State Irrigation Association would like to thank Senator Bostelman, thank you, for creating the Surface Water Irrigation Infrastructure Fund benefiting irrigation districts. We are very grateful to the Appropriations Committee for committing to establishing this fund last year as well. Thank you. In fact, 2 of our board members have been assisting statewide districts with their infrastructure plans as they work alongside of the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources, who are the custodians of the Surface Water Irrigation Infrastructure Fund. This fund is enabling districts to repair and rehabilitate aging infrastructure for the safe and efficient delivery of surface water, along with matching dollars such as federal BRIC and WaterSmart grants. This creates the leveraging of both state and federal monies. The resulting investment that the legislature has made will continue to support the importance of maintaining the conveyance of one of Nebraska's most precious natural resources. Second, the actions to create the fund are working as intended. One example is the Sargent Irrigation District on the Milburn Diversion Dam. I know that you guys talked a little bit or had questions for other folks. I'm going to give you a very specific example of how this is actually working. I talked with Matt Lukasevich, who is the general manager for Sargent, and he said, and I quote, "The Milburn Diversion Dam is the only way to get irrigation water to our customers of 14,635 acres. There was excessive scoring on the concrete apron discovered during an inspection, which created a hole approximately 3 feet wide and 12 inches deep. For fear of losing our structure, we could not use that part of the dam for the 2022 season. We accepted a bid from a contractor for repairs in the amount of $987,468.06, plus in-kind work of $32,863.95 for a total project cost of $1,020,332.01. That equals another $69.72 per acre in addition to what farmers are already paying, which is $42 per acre. If we were to bond for this project, it would have been even more with interest included. A project of this cost, and being that it is our only diversion dam, could have been devastating for the irrigation district had we not received funding through the Surface Water Irrigation Infrastructure Fund." Unquote. This example is just one of many more projects in various stages of engineering, review, approval, and completion. In conclusion, the Nebraska State Irrigation Association fully supports LB 125, providing that the current corpus of the infrastructure fund be affixed to interest-bearing mechanisms administered by the State Investment Officer pursuant to Nebraska Capital Expansion Act and the Nebraska State Funds Investment Act. And further, that the investment earnings derived from this interest be credited to the existing corpus. Leveraging the corpus for investment gains makes for sound financial stewardship. On behalf of the Nebraska State Irrigation Association, thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I would welcome any questions that you might have.
Other questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, sir, for coming.
Yes, sir.
So on this project, did you make an application from the fund?
Yes, that came directly from Matt Lukasevich and his team did.
Were you granted? How much did you get?
I don't know exactly how much he got in particular, but he did give me this example of what it would have been. I do believe it's a little over $1 million when I talked to him on the phone.
Okay. So your irrigators, what kind of allotment do they get?
On that particular portion, I'm not quite sure. That's a Matt question, but I'll tell you what, I will find that out from Matt. I'll call him today and I'll get back with your office.
I'm just curious.
Yes, sir. I will find that out. Every district is different. Their stakeholders, their board of directors have different ways of allotting different things and assessing what they're going to charge per acre.
How does it look this year?
What's that?
How does your water supply look this year?
It looks very good. You know, we have a fair amount of good snowpack in the Rockies from what I understand. And so as that starts to melt and gets through the system, I think that we're going to be in good shape. And that will also bode well for the groundwater as well, too, because there are in some areas hydrologic connections between both surface and groundwater. So we're thankful for the snow that they got out west for sure.
Is that snowpack 130% of normal?
That I don't know for sure on that number, but I will get that to you.
I've read that somewhere.
Yeah, it's high. I know it's over 100.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your
Yes, sir.
testimony.
Thank you for your time.
Are there other proponents for LB 125? Seeing none, is there anyone in opposition? Seeing none, is there anyone in neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator, you're welcome. The Senator waves closing, and we have no position comments. That will conclude LB 125. We'll open a hearing for LB 401. Senator Dorn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members of Appropriations Committee. My name is Myron Dorn, M-Y-R-O-N, D-O-R-N, and I represent District 30, which is all of Gates County and a portion of southeastern Lancaster County. I am here today to present a funding proposal for LB 401. The bill would appropriate a little over $1 million from the general fund over the next 2 years to fund the Nebraska Messenet system. Messenet is a meteorological term that describes a network of automated weather stations which are close enough to each other to make hourly observations and measure and track weather data. These automated stations provide information on conditions related to drought, flood risk, and wind conditions. In the 1980s, Nebraska established a weather network across the state of local weather stations and was a leader in this area. I have given you an article from the Omaha World Herald that talks about the purpose of the system and pictures of what the systems looks like. In 1994, Oklahoma was interested in establishing a Messenet system and looked to Nebraska for guidance in setting up this system in Oklahoma. Nebraska has fallen behind, and this is unacceptable. An example of how a Messenet system can be essential is a fire chief in Oklahoma was keeping an eye on brush fires in the area. He had concerns about when or if the winds would shift and put residents in the path of the fire. With the information from their Messenet system, he was able to notify of the wind shift and was able to evacuate employees of nearby Starbucks and move people out in time. The Messenet system has many partners: the university's climate office, the Department of Natural Resources, local NRDs, cattlemen, and farmers. A multitude of entities support the Messenet system. It comes down to the question of funding. After I introduced the bill, it became obvious that there were many partners who need to be at a table and develop a long-term sustainable plan for a statewide Messenet system. I have spoken to a few of those partners, and we agree that the best way forward is to hold LB 401 over the summer and conduct an interim study with all the partners involved. I would close by asking that the committee to hold LB 401 and know that we'll be back next year with a stronger plan to make Nebraska a leader again in the Messenet system. But I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody had about this system. We've had a lot of interest in this since we brought it, and what's going on in the state. There are some testifiers from the cattlemen behind me that we'll talk a little bit about it also. But currently right now, all the people that we've worked with and been involved with, they have decided too that we really need to work on this over the summer, have an interim study and go that route. So.
Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. We'll now invite proponents for LB 401. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Ken Herz, K-E-N-H-E-R-Z. I am a past president of Nebraska Cattlemen and am here today to testify on behalf of Nebraska's Agricultural Leaders Working Group, comprised of Nebraska Cattlemen, Nebraska Corn Growers Association, Nebraska Farm Bureau, Nebraska State Dairy Association, Nebraska Soybean Association, Nebraska Pork Producers, and Renewable Fuels Nebraska. The Nebraska Mesonet System was established in the 1980s. Since its establishment, agricultural producers across the state rely on critical data that federal weather monitors do not collect. The data includes soil temperatures, soil moisture at various depths, drought information, and cattle comfort scoring. This information is beneficial in knowing when to plant, irrigate, harvest, and provides information which helps producers keep cattle comfortable in extreme weather conditions. These stations are equipped to observe weather conditions down to the second. The Nebraska Mesonet network is utilized by many partners, such as the University of Nebraska, the Nebraska Department of Natural Resources, agricultural producers, NRDs, USDA, National Weather Service, and the Forest Service. The above organizations use information to make timely business decisions regarding current conditions. In doing research on this legislation, we found insurance companies also use this system to gather information on claims after windstorms, hail, and other precedented weather events. Our system from our perspective is underfunded. We used to be the premier Mesonet network, but have drastically fallen behind compared to surrounding states. We lack adequate coverage of the entire state to report accurately. To catch up, will take additional funding to this bill. All of our neighboring states fund their state network in some capacity. In 2022, 7 of the 30 stations were set to close in Nebraska. And in 2023, a possibility of additional 10 are set to close. Thank you, Senator Dorn, for recognizing the importance of the Mesonet system in Nebraska. We look forward to further discussions with all interested parties to ensure that funding needed for a robust Mesonet system in Nebraska will soon be attained. Thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions? Senator Vargas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. I know you mentioned to catch up, it will take additional funding. All of our neighboring states fund the state network in some capacity. Do you have any information on what the funding looks like from the others? What does funding look like in Iowa or in Missouri or in Kansas and other states around us?
I'm sorry, I can't provide that off the top of my head. Our staff can get that information to you. I don't know what that level is. I know Oklahoma has the premier Mesonet system. I do believe theirs is well over $1.5 million.
Okay, no, that's just helpful. And it might be something that happens in an interim study, but I appreciate any follow-up on that.
Yeah, and other states are struggling to find additional funds to improve their stations too. I know Nebraska isn't the only one who is looking for additional funds to make a more robust system.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Senator Armendariz?
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for being here. Have you looked at private companies that use the system to help fund that? You mentioned the insurance companies use it. Could the media companies use it as well for data and information? You said it's more robust than what they already provide.
The information out there, most of the information out there is free to anybody who wants to use it. There are some private companies that will provide some weather data, but again, that's private for most of the times for their own use. And also the Nebraska Mesonet system is very highly regarded for their equipment that they have, the accuracy that they have. Fact is, there are other states that send their equipment to Nebraska to be calibrated because we have such a good a resource here in the state for calibrating the equipment. So Nebraska is highly looked at as far as calibration. Nebraska, again, was the first one to develop it, but for the funding purposes, it's been kind of a hodgepodge of who funds the Mesonet system because it's not everybody's top priority. When budgets get tough, a lot of the money is cut back. And that's a situation that we are in right now, is that the different entities that did fund this, a lot of them are pulling the funding back a little bit. And so that is a reason that there are some stations being closed.
Is there an opportunity to charge for that, for the industries that do find this valuable? So I would see insurance companies would
Yes,
find that information very valuable. The media companies find that very valuable. And do you think that's an opportunity to charge them for access to that?
yes. I have been in discussion with some different entities. I've been in discussion with the University of Nebraska. And that is one of the purposes of what we're trying to do, is identify the organizations and entities that would be interested in helping support this mesonet system because of the data that is collected. But I think, to Senator Dorn's point, is that it has to be something that is looked at and something that we try to get our hands around and come up with a complete basic package of all entities that would help to fund this, and then to come back to the legislature.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony. Are there additional proponents for LB 401? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Tom Hogemeyer, T-O-M-H-O-E-G-E-M-E-Y-E-R. And I came to testify in support of LB 401. I was not aware that Senator Dorn had recommended it to be held over and studied, but I'm in support of that as well. I was born and raised on a farm in Dodge County, Nebraska. I earned a bachelor's degree in crop science and a PhD at Iowa State. I owned and managed several ag businesses near Hooper and still own some farmland up there. I served several years as a professor of practice at UNL. And I am a member of the Nebraska Climate Elder Legacy Group. We're a group of individuals that are working to promote awareness, knowledge, and education on workable solutions to climate challenges for individuals, for businesses, and for the faith communities. As you all have probably observed in your lives, we are living with more environmental variability than we observed several decades ago. Since 2000, my land has been impacted by 2 record droughts, 2 100-year floods, and 1 500-year flood. The probabilities of that being a random set of events are pretty small. Simultaneously, ag is getting much more complex, and many decisions, from irrigation timing to application of fertilizer and pesticide, is increasingly data-driven. Current as well as historical and predicted environmental conditions must be integrated with the producer's own data to optimize those economic returns while minimizing the impact on soils, water, and air. Current weather and climate data also provide early warning and management to the livestock operations, as the previous gentleman spoke to. This brings me to the importance of the Nebraska mesonet system. Research over the last couple of decades has enabled producers to conserve groundwater as well as surface water while minimizing runoff and leaching of nitrogen and pesticides into the groundwater. While the project started with only 4 stations, it expanded to more than 65 because of the wide environmental variation. The southeast Nebraska area is more similar to the Piedmont of Virginia than it is to western Nebraska. The area around Chadron is more similar to central Washington than it is to eastern Nebraska. We sit in the middle of this huge amount of variation that has to be measured and measured locally for good decisions to be made. The Mesonet data is also useful for numerous applications for citizens other than ag producers. The Mesonet data is used by city and rural water system managers, hydrologists, emergency managers for hazard mitigation, energy system managers, drought assessment, snow and rainfall runoff for flooding potential, and so on. It's accessed every day by the NOAA National Weather System for weather forecasts and watches and warnings, as well as basin-wide management decisions for things like the Republican River Compact and for fire weather data and lots of other uses. Oklahoma was so impressed by the Nebraska system, they invested in 120 stations for an area with smaller footprint than we have. I don't know what their funding is, but it's used regularly for tornado forecasting and for fire danger warnings in Oklahoma. The problem basically is that physical equipment and electronic sensors don't last forever. And technology moves on. You know, it's hard to maintain old technology stuff. Funding has been piecemeal and unstable, and at least 8 stations have been already closed, and a lot of others are in danger of closing due to lack of funds to maintain and replace these older stations. The data quality is in serious danger of becoming impaired, reducing the ability to provide accurate and timely information to assess the potential hazards and also to help producers and, conserve the quality of groundwater as well as the amounts.
That's your time, if you would wrap it up.
I will do that. We're at an inflection point. We're either going to invest the money to maintain this or we're going to lose it. And I submit it's in the interest of Nebraska and all Nebraskans to maintain it.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other proponents for LB 401? Good afternoon.
Hi. Thank you for listening to us day after day after day after day. We appreciate it. I'm Moni Usas, MoniUsazz, and I represent Nebraska Citizens Climate Lobby. We support LB 401 as a way to build more resilient and prosperous communities across the state. Nebraskans pride ourselves on making good decisions, but decisions are only as good as the data and the information available. We complain about the accuracy of meteorologist predictions, but what if there was a way to improve weather forecasting by gathering weather data closer to home? More accurate data is a boon to weather forecasters as well as producers, farm extension services, county emergency managers, firefighters, and even school superintendents. Its economic value would be undeniable. So sadly, Nebraska's in this situation where we have the technology, but our Mesonet is degrading because it has no stable funding source. And some of the weather stations have been removed. In a state where net farm income in Nebraska topped $8 billion in 2021 and 2022, and that's from the Farm Bureau, funding for more accurate weather prediction is crucial. A regular funding source from the legislature would be essential to get the program up and running. And what I read was that to cover Nebraska fully, you need 130 weather stations. But in its 31 years of existence, we've never reached that full capacity. 81 was the highest number, and right now there's 55 active stations. So many parts of the state are unprotected. And Oklahoma has the Mesonet we can aspire to. While hourly U.S. weather station reports are important, the Oklahoma Mesonet provides weather forecasters with more frequent and more localized weather information. This information is critical because what Oklahoma says is some of the most destructive or least predictable weather occurs on a scale so small that it's easy to miss with the federal stations. So better forecasts of excessive rainfall and real-time measurement of soil moisture conditions will help improve lead time on flood warnings. For agriculture, it provides improved insect and disease advisories, spraying recommendations, irrigation scheduling, frost protection, planting and harvesting recommendations, and prescribed burn advisories. And Mesonet also provides emergency managers with a tool they can use to make life-saving decisions. Fire managers, it gives them an opportunity to assess fire danger conditions over the next several days and monitor current conditions during a wildfire. My nephew worked as a firefighter in Idaho, and he says these reports were exceedingly useful and accurate. And it makes fighting fires and the firefighters themselves much safer. And mesonets are just another form of adaptation to a changing climate. And this is according to Kevin Brinson, who's the director of the Delaware Environmental Monitoring System and the chair of the Climatologist Association's Mesonet committee. He sees weather data as driving so many decisions in our society and our economy that it's an essential need to have a mesonet. So Nebraska needs a mesonet that's better funded. We need to protect agriculture, businesses, and our communities with the data it provides. And we can't afford to wait. So please support LB 401.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Being none, thank you for your testimony. Additional proponents for LB 401? Welcome.
My name is Melissa Landis, MELISSA, LANDIS. Point of clarification, I'm offering testimony on behalf of Lori Benson. Lori is ill with COVID, and so as I read her testimony, please keep in mind that the use of the I pronoun or all of the testimony reflects her wisdom, her professional path, and her life experience. As Lori and I serve on the First Plymouth Climate Action Team together. As chairperson and on behalf of the Climate Action Team for First Plymouth Congregational Church in Lincoln, I support LB 401. Previous testifiers have talked about the value of the mesonet to agriculture and other business sectors, to fighting wildfires, to weather forecasting and other concerns. I echo all their comments, but I would like to talk about the importance of a robust mesonet to the University of Nebraska and the students and why it matters to Nebraskans. For several years, I was an assistant director of the University of Nebraska Water Center and worked with researchers, extension faculty, administrators, and students. And I don't claim to be an expert, but I am not speaking for the university. I am speaking on behalf of what I observed. When potential faculty and students, especially graduate students, consider where to work or study, they closely look at the facilities and infrastructure that will support them. We have no trouble understanding how up-to-date laboratories or field sites, such as the Ag facility at Clay Center, are attractive to potential faculty and students. We need to think about how the mesonet can be viewed in this same way. The mesonet and its data are critical across a range of disciplines, especially agronomy, horticulture, earth and atmospheric sciences, and natural resources. There are also valuable data to the disciplines of biological sciences, chemistry, biological systems engineering, and civil engineering. Nebraskans benefit when we have a faculty and student body on the ground in Nebraska looking closely at how changing weather and climate will impact agriculture, transportation, flood control, and other critical concerns. There are also specific programs for undergraduate students that use the mesonet, such as applied climate science, that help make the university attractive. Attracting and retaining talent, educated young people has been a constant topic for 3 decades that I've been in Nebraska. If we can attract students, we can improve the chances they'll stay in Nebraska. This is particularly critical, in my opinion, for master's students because increasingly we need additional education and experience they can bring to the jobs in this state. One of the things I learned when my daughter was doing her training to become a physician was that after they complete training, doctors go into practice within an average of 100 miles of where they completed residency. I looked for similar statistics to other disciplines and couldn't find them, but it's not hard to imagine that we're a lot more likely to keep graduates, especially master's program grads, if they attend school here. The promise of a lower marginal income tax rate is unlikely to attract them, but a robust MassNet and interdisciplinary research opportunities is a much better bet. And if we want good students, we need to start by attracting and retaining quality faculty. I've been told that LB 401, this statement doesn't reflect the interim study idea. I've been told that the LB 401 is unlikely to be a priority bill and thus is probably dead. But we know if you want to get this funded, you can. I strongly urge you to find the small amount of money it would take to protect the MassNet. We need to consider this as basic infrastructure that will ultimately serve all Nebraskans and our economy. Finally, you may wonder why a church group cares about this. We believe in science and using it in a changing climate to protect God's people and planet. Thank you for considering our comments.
Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB 401? Seeing none, is anyone here in opposition? Seeing none, anyone here in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator, you're welcome to close. He waives closing. And regarding LB 401, we have position comments for the record. 32 proponents, no opponents, no one in the neutral. That concludes LB 401. We will now open a hearing for LB 506. Senator Bostar. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements, members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Elliot Bostar, for the record, that's ELIOT-BOSTAR, representing Legislative District 29. I'm here today to present LB 506, a bill that appropriates $200 million from federal funds, specifically the Federal Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund in fiscal year 2023-2024, to the Department of Natural Resources. The Department of Natural Resources will utilize those funds to award a grant to the city of the primary class in order to provide for water treatment plants, water treatment, transmission, distribution, land acquisition, permitting, water well fields, pumping, and transportation of water for the purpose of providing potable water to the municipality. Additionally, LB 506 provides $20 million from federal funds for small and rural communities to install reverse osmosis systems in community water systems where drinking water test levels are above 10 parts per million of nitrate, and if appropriate, provides funds for use to install reverse osmosis systems if test levels for nitrate in drinking water pumped from private wells are above 10 parts per million. Water infrastructure projects are ideally suited for the use of federal coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds provided through the American Rescue Plan Act. These projects are one-time capital investments, and the cost of ongoing operations of the project can be sustained through rate revenues. You'll hear from testifiers behind me that securing a second water source for the city of Lincoln and surrounding communities is one of the most pressing objectives for the region.
The Lincoln Transportation Utilities Department currently provides water to 291,677 residents. This number is projected to grow to nearly 470,000 by 2060. The process of securing a second water source is likely to take years to decades, but it's critical that we start now. City of Lincoln requires both an increased quantity of water to support our growing population and critical infrastructure redundancy in the event of future disruption of our Platte River well fields due to unforeseen circumstances such as severe drought or flooding. As recently as 2019, the City of Lincoln experienced a crisis when our Platte River well fields were threatened during historic flooding that spring. Representatives from the City of Lincoln will outline the specifics of how the city would allocate this funding and present cost estimates for connecting to surface water resources, as well as discussing the urgency for water redundancy. Thanks to an investment this committee made last session, the City of Lincoln was able to begin the process of surveying, design, and preliminary engineering for second water sources. A task force of 27 community members, business and agriculture leaders, and technical experts was assembled. The task force met for 9 months to determine possible secondary water sources for the region, and after exhaustive research and deliberation, the task force provided this official recommendation for the community. We, the Water Source Advisory Council, recommend that the city pursue a well field and treatment facility along the Missouri River with direct transport of treated water to Lincoln. The Advisory Council also recommends that the city explore the potential impacts and benefits of a reservoir lake as proposed by the legislature. It's vital to appreciate this is not merely a local or regional issue, but a statewide concern. As residential demand for water grows in southeast Nebraska, we will find ourselves in conflict with Nebraska's agricultural community that uses Platte River water for their livelihoods. If we don't take action within the decade, Platte River resources from potentially as far as the Panhandle, currently being used for agriculture, could be diverted to meet the needs of residential water use. This legislation is about preserving the good life for both urban and rural communities alike. LB 506 is an opportunity to create a Southeast Nebraska water infrastructure network that can support and supply the entire region. Behind me, you'll hear from the City of Waverly regarding how this legislation can address issues specifically faced by their community. The League of Municipalities will also be speaking about the regional opportunities this funding can create for smaller communities. I know that the City of Lincoln has already had conversations with the cities of Hickman, Waverly, and the village of Greenwood about potentially connecting to Lincoln's water supply and expects to have more conversations soon with surrounding communities. Southeast Nebraska needs LB 506 for the long-term success of our smaller villages and cities, as well as our larger communities. It's imperative that we capture this opportunity to invest in the economic, agricultural, and public health of our future. We are unlikely to see such an infusion of federal dollars again, and it's crucial that these resources be used where they can do the most good. I encourage you to advance LB 506, and I thank you for your time and attention. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Other questions? Saying none, thank you.
Thank you.
First proponent for LB 506, welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Elizabeth Elliott, ELIZABETHELLIOTT, Director of Lincoln Transportation and Utilities. I'm here to testify in support of LB 506. First, I want to thank Senator Bostar for introducing the bill and for his efforts to ensure that Nebraska residents and businesses have access to sustainable water resources both now and into the future. Second, I would thank all of you for your support, not only this year, but last year in access to sustainable water resources and the initial $20 million to help us continue our efforts to find a second water supply. As Director Riley said earlier today, water is the backbone of our society and our economy. Sustainable water resources have always been important to Lincoln and Nebraska, but the importance was underscored in 2019 by historic flooding along the Platte River in wake of a bomb cyclone. This event jarred our community from a water reliability standpoint. Lincoln draws its water from only one source, aquifers supported by the Platte River. The damage caused by that 2019 flood highlighted the vulnerability of our wells in the Platte River. We were lucky that although the damage was extensive, we were still able to provide water to Lincoln residents and businesses. If additional steps are not taken, we may not be so lucky next time. This experience led us to accelerate our efforts to secure a second source of water. In May of 2022, we established a 27-member advisory council, which included Senator Bostar and Senator Wishart, to review all of our second source options. After 9 months, nearly 40 hours worth of work, and reviewing 14 alternatives, the advisory council recommended that the city of Lincoln pursue a well-filled and treatment facility along the Missouri River with direct transport of treated water directly to Lincoln, as well as explore the potential impacts and benefits of a reservoir lake as proposed by the Nebraska Legislature. A second source of water supply not only provides Lincoln a redundant system, it also affords an opportunity to southeast Nebraska communities to connect to a regional water supply. It'll create economic development opportunities along the corridor. It'll grow jobs, attract businesses, and increase revenue for the state. But even more importantly, a second water source protects Nebraska farmers by eliminating the risk that a call on the river would halt irrigation as far west as the Sandhills. Thousands of acres across the state need water from the Platte, Loup, and Elkhorn rivers to irrigate their crops. Having a second source of water lessens the chance that Lincoln would be forced to exercise its water rights during a water scarcity emergency. Investing in a second water source provides assurance to farmers that they will have water for their crops. This $200 million investment from the state ARPA funds will protect and provide for the entire state. Because of our extensive planning, we are poised to strategically invest these funds by the end of 2026. Therefore, we ask for your support of LB 506. And again, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Further questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you for coming. So do you know what the date is on Lincoln's water rights? Are they senior to all others?
So water rights is a little interesting when it comes to municipalities. We are senior to most of the water rights across the state. However, municipalities actually have an even higher priority, and it's not necessarily tied to the timing of wells. So we would have a higher priority to most of the agricultural rights.
Which ones wouldn't you have authority over?
There could be a few that were before us, but because of the municipality side of it, we potentially could impact those as well. I would probably leave the exact details to a water law expert, but as part of our advisory council, we did consult with water experts. The water expert and water law experts came in and did address the advisory council as well to answer those types of questions.
So you're saying Lincoln water rights supersedes the date and time where someone else may have applied?
There potentially, yes, because of the fact that it provides municipal domestic water for a community.
Other questions? Senator Wishart?
Thank you, Liz, for being here today. Can you walk this committee through when did we establish our first water source as a city, and how long does that last?
So the first water source actually was here in Lincoln, but because of the water quality, it was too salty. We started about 100 years ago looking for another second water source at the time, which found our way to Ashland. So 99 years ago, we started the plant in Ashland, and it has served us ever since. And because of that foresight to own and operate that property, we've been able to expand over time, which has allowed us to continue operations well into the future.
And then why is the date 2048 so important for Lincolnites in the state of Nebraska?
Based on all of our water modeling, looking at new technology for plumbing fixtures, looking at our water conservation, looking at the growth that we have seen historically and what's modeled ahead. Right now, our wells and our treatment facility capacity are able to handle water quantity until 2048, where we expect at that point the population and the size of our treatment facility to be maxed out at that point.
Okay, thank you. And then the expectation is how long, if we are to build, when we are to build the second water source, how long will it last for Lincoln and the surrounding communities?
Because of the strategic planning that we've been doing and the foresight and wanting to make sure this is here for us for 100 years and beyond to serve multiple generations.
Fantastic. And then last question, the Senator Bostar is here today asking for $200 million. Can you talk about what the total cost we expect the project to be, and then what the city is doing to look for other funding opportunities so that we can meet that 2048 deadline?
Based on the financial analysis and the engineering that we've done so far, we expect a second water source to cost, in today's dollars, around $1.39 billion. It's going to take about 15 to 20 years to build. So what we have been doing for the last number of years is we have been putting into our current rate model money to set aside for the second water source. We've also continued to leverage both state and federal funds. Obviously, the $20 million that we received last year went directly to that. About $3 to $4 million of that 20 is going to finding the exact location of a well field. And then we also have about 16 million of the last year's 20 million to go towards adding horizontal collector well number 5, which will get us that quantity to the 2048 while we have time to build the second water source. So we'll continue to add this into our rate modeling. So we're preparing and saving funds. We also will continue to leverage grants, state and federal funding from here, as well as looking to build that into our rate models.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next proponent for LB 506. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm Bruce Boyer. For the record, that is spelled BruceBohrer. And it's my pleasure to be in front of you today on behalf of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, the Lincoln Independent Business Association, and the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce in support of Senator Bostar's LB 506, which, as you know, directs $200 million of federal funding for a grant program to fund actions needed to secure a secondary water source, which, as you heard, is the Missouri River groundwater well field. For Lincoln and the Southeast Nebraska region, I say our region because, as you heard, Lincoln has as we've embarked on this analysis, we've heard from other communities, been approached by smaller communities, and as you just heard from Director, about the possibilities of tapping into this source. Thank you. And the Chamber views this as an opportunity for more regional partnerships for basic needs, but also growth opportunities in the future. Additionally, LB 506 directs $20 million for federal funding to provide grants for small and rural communities to install reverse osmosis systems where nitrate levels are high. As you all know, and as you've just heard, water resources are intertwined with our state's history and development from many aspects: agricultural, industrial, recreational, commercial, residential, to name a few. I have absolutely no doubt that water will continue to play a central role in Nebraska's development into the future. I have some history here. Since 1930, Lincoln has sourced our municipal water from the Platte River near Ashland, so I'm not going to go into all that since you already heard from Director Liz Elliott. This is obviously, after the floods, has been a more immediate conversation. I think it first showed up in our water master plan in 2014, so about 20 years ago, again in 2020. And then after the floods, obviously, it got to be a more immediate discussion. And you just heard about the mayor's water resource or water source advisory council, which was chaired by Susan Seacrest, founder and former president of Nebraska Groundwater Foundation, and also Senator Bostar. I won't go through all that too. You just heard of the work of the advisory committee. In closing, I want to mention that the chamber organizes what we refer to as a community collaboration meeting with our Lincoln and Lancaster County delegation of senators and the city and county elected leaders and business community leaders. This issue and the legislation that's been brought forward to you, it has been a high priority discussion and been prioritized by that community group. Along with that, our board adopted as part of our policy agenda for 2023, our state policy agenda, this issue. And it's included within our Vitality Lincoln strategic plan, which we just released. So it's a vitally important issue for our continued growth, not only Lincoln, but as you heard, the region. And the Lincoln Chamber appreciates and thanks Senator Bostar for introducing this legislative proposal. And I will close with that and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Additional proponents for LB 506. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Clements, members of the Appropriation Committee, my name is Dave Landis, D-A-V-E-L-A-N-D-I-S. I'm here today because I'm the chair of the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District, which in the 6 counties that we have has a good deal of this southeast Nebraska swath between the Missouri River and the city of Lincoln. And of course, a number of towns in there and rural systems of water. We're here as supporters of 506, and we speak with the permission of the Nebraska Association of Resource Districts as their proponent as well. And let the record reflect that if you would. First, we want to say thank you. You helped us with some planning money that allowed us to get that planning process off the ground, and you can tell how seriously we took that, and we're grateful for the assistance that we got in making that happen. Water, about as important a resource as we've got. Between soil and water and agriculture, it's the backbone of Nebraska. The project before you is 506 is the largest and potentially most important project for the state's 2nd largest city and southeast Nebraska for generations to come. We're looking at multiple generations having their water problems solved with this project. Securing a second source of water is necessary to ensure economic and environmental resilience of the southeast area of Nebraska and to make it secure for, as we say, generations. Without the support for a water treatment plant, for transmission pipes, for rights of way, for well fields and the related activities, the city of Lincoln may have to draw more water from the already limited Platte River, which could further impact endangered species and upstream users. It's true that, and I think the source is the Constitution. Municipal water supplies are superior to agricultural supplies, and if there is a conflict, it's not first in time. It's the use to which the water is put in that context, which means we would be endangering our agricultural interests to the west because they're upstream and we would be moving upstream. The investment will provide assurances for Lincoln and southeast Nebraska through 2075. And we also want to say that we support the $20 million for reverse osmosis systems, either private or public, that the last section of the bill reflects on. Reverse osmosis is a way of dealing with the very thorny problem of nitrates in the water. And nitrates in the water is poisonous. It makes the water unusable for many of the purposes for which we would use it. And it's a problem that is better solved before there ever is a problem. But that's not possible now. And we have areas with high nitrates, and there are limited ways of dealing with that problem, and reverse osmosis is one of them. So we like that part of the bill too. Thank you for your time, and I was glad I didn't get to the yellow light.
Other questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you, Mr. Landis, for being here. So just let me be clear on this. My question is, so if push came to shove, the cities would have superior or senior rights to the water?
I am telling you what I believe the law is without being an expert in it. But I've heard that on more than one occasion in hearing rooms like this.
I believe it was George Washington once said, if you destroy the cities, they'll rebuild again. If you destroy the farms, weeds will grow in the streets of the cities. The farms were here long before the cities.
Lovely quote. Its source is William Jennings Bryan,
Well, whoever it was.
a Democrat who ran 3 times for the presidency of the United States and never succeeded.
Never succeeded.
Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you, Senator Landis. Where this is going to be in the area or connect to the Missouri River, is the South Platte, Lower South Platte, is that part of your NRD, or is this some other NRD? Or my question centers on, will they need permits from you, and to get into the Missouri River, who will they need permits from the Corps?
We're probably going to have a letter. I'm going to turn around and see if I can see.
You can send some.
Because I'm not sure that I know exactly where on the Missouri River. And we don't go all that way for that one. I'm wondering if I see Paul. The well field in the Missouri, I'm thinking it's not in our NRD.
Between Nebraska City and Plattsburgh, it's likely in our, but it hasn't been decided.
Okay.
But that's probably not in your NRD then.
I don't think so.
That area, because you're more in the Lincoln area.
For the lower Platte South.
Will they need permits from you? Or you don't know at this time yet?
I'm going to say that they're going to need to go to the NRD of that area. But I also heard that say we have not determined where exactly on the Missouri River it is, which it leaves an uncertainty in the answer that you get.
Yep. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Lippincott?
I can tell you with certainty that it was Cowper the poet who said that God made the country, man made the towns.
Thank you. I wouldn't dispute that, nor would I dispute the wisdom of what's being said.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Thank you for your testimony. Are there other proponents for LB 506? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Stephanie Fisher, STEPHANIE-FISHER, and I serve as the City Administrator for the City of Waverly. I'm here to testify on behalf of Waverly in support of LB 506. Our community may be facing serious obstacles to clean and plentiful drinking water as a result of the rising nitrate contamination in our present wells. We have recently developed a drinking water protection management plan through consultation with local stakeholders and the public, with the primary purpose of protecting the city's drinking water from current and future contamination, primarily from nitrates. This effort has included technical and financial assistance from the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District, the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy, and the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Nitrate concentrations in one of the city's 8 drinking water wells have exceeded the Environmental Protection Agency maximum contaminant level of 10 milligrams per liter a few times in the last 5 years. Other municipal wells have also shown increasing nitrate concentrations. Thankfully, we have other wells with which we blend our water, and that has been able to keep our drinking water safe for our community. But if the nitrate levels continue to rise, the city would be forced to treat drinking water for nitrates, an extremely costly endeavor. Additionally, this could also force additional regulations onto farmers in our wellhead protection area in order to help lower the nitrate levels. A nitrate reduction target has been identified by the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District. Our city and the surrounding area are currently working to reduce nitrate loading from human activity by 63%. In order to achieve and maintain groundwater nitrate concentrations at or below these identified levels, public education and outreach, along with stakeholder engagement and a volunteer approach of adopting best management practices for nitrate application are being implemented. This may not be enough, and the city will need to develop alternate solutions for safe drinking water. The opportunities afforded in LB 506 could benefit our community in a number of ways. Waverly may be able to benefit from the funding specifically allocated for reverse osmosis nitrate treatment if our current efforts to lower nitrate concentrations are unsuccessful. Additionally, if Lincoln is able to connect to a secondary water source, Waverly may be in a position to purchase drinking water directly from Lincoln in order to meet our needs. It would provide safe drinking water both in a capacity nature and also to the redundancy effect for the city of Waverly. It is clear that our community needs to continue looking into the future of our water access. LB 506 represents an opportunity to begin construction on a Southeast Nebraska water infrastructure network that can supply the entire region. This legislation is a chance not just for Lincoln, but for the surrounding communities as well, to secure long-term safe drinking water. Southeast Nebraska needs this funding in order to protect our growing small communities as well as our urban centers. I'd ask for your continued support of LB 506 and thank you for your time. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Additional proponents for LB 506. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sarah Clements, members of the committee. My name is Lynn Rex, L-Y-N-N-R-E-X, representing the League of Nebraska Municipalities. It's a privilege to be here today to talk to you about this very important project. I served on the mayor's task force. I was very pleased to do that with the advisory council and 26 other individuals from stakeholders all over this area, including ag. And I think probably one of the most important beneficiaries of this effort will be ag. One of the reasons why that's the case is just basically because of not only preferences and the fact that this really puts the city of Lincoln in a position to not have to use their water rights and impact ag rights. And I would indicate that Don Blankenau is here. He's an attorney that's an expert on water law, specifically Article 15, Section 6, if you have those questions. But what I really like to underscore is my testimony today is not just on behalf of the League of Nebraska Municipalities, but also the city of Hickman. They intended to be here today, but they were unable to be here because of another commitment. But not just that as well, not just that municipality, but the surrounding areas. The league is contacted on a regular basis from municipalities in this jurisdiction about what can Lincoln do to partner. And Lincoln has always partnered and been collaborative with its municipalities in Lancaster County and the surrounding area. This is a tremendous opportunity for Southeast Nebraska. And of the 14 alternatives initially presented to the committee over a period of 9 months almost, during that time frame, the civic engagement was very intense. I brought my little book in case you had any questions, but to tell you that it was weighted voting, it was a very, very clear choice in terms of what the best approach was in terms of Lincoln's second water source. So the first 7 alternatives of the 14 really readily eliminated just because they weren't feasible. And the other 7 were considered diligently with expertise of the city of Lincoln. It was the most extensive civic engagement process within which I've ever been involved, and I have partnered with a number of municipalities and organizations for a number of years. So again, happy to basically support this. Really appreciate Senator Bostar's leadership, Senator Wisher, your leadership in this important effort, and the city of Lincoln. and the way in which they have reached out to surrounding communities to make sure that this is not just about Lincoln. It is about the surrounding communities. It is about agriculture. It's about making sure that Lincoln has a second source that will go for the next 50 years. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there other proponents for LB 506? Seeing none, is anyone here in opposition? Seeing none, is anyone here that would like to testify in the neutral capacity? Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Dunkley, ANDREW, and I am with the Nebraska Farm Bureau testifying today on LB 506 in a neutral capacity, although I do try to avoid testifying in a neutral capacity in front of Senator Erdman normally. But we appreciate Senator Bostar's efforts to represent his constituents and bring this bill. As Nebraska Farm Bureau represents more rural and agricultural members, our neutral stance on this bill stems from the funding provided for the city of Lincoln. We do not normally weigh in on urban issues, and that is where the neutral stance comes into this. However, it is important for you to know that I represented the Nebraska Farm Bureau and Agriculture on the Water 2.0 Securing Lincoln's Second Water Source Council that was previously mentioned. We were very appreciative of the 9-month process that thoroughly evaluated options for a second water source for Lincoln. This was invaluable to agriculture to understand the decision-making process for a project such as this. The recommendation provided to the mayor was the best option for agriculture and would even benefit rural communities between Lincoln and the water source. As mentioned by previous testifiers, a big concern of some of the options were the upstream effects to water users. That's obviously top of mind, and I'm confident in where the council landed on the recommendation to the mayor. Senator Bostar's efforts to support not only the city of Lincoln but Nebraska agriculture were frequent and very appreciated. And the contributions of Senator Wishart were also key, and we thank her as well. We do support the $20 million allocation in LB 506 to private landowners using groundwater as their drinking water for reverse osmosis machines. Solving the issue of nitrates in drinking water will require short and long-term solutions, as you've heard from me before. First and foremost, the way to address nitrate levels in drinking water is clear-cut. Reverse osmosis treatment of the water is the swiftest and most economical way to address drinking water quality. Granted, cleaning up the drinking water this way is a Band-Aid, but it is a necessary one right now. Long-term solutions are much more complicated, and one size will not fit all. For that reason, we support Governor Pillen's $1 million in his budget, as you heard yesterday in the NDEE testimony, to study how best to address nitrates in drinking water in a state that is as varied as Nebraska. Nebraska Farm Bureau wants clean drinking water for every person in the state, and reverse osmosis is a way to ensure that for homes with levels of nitrates more than 10 parts per million. We are clear in support of the legislature, further funding for the NDEE's reverse osmosis program. And thank you, and I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Other questions? Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. So, Mr. Dunkley, tell me which part of this testimony is neutral?
We are in a neutral capacity as far as the funding for the city of Lincoln.
Okay, here's a statement. We Farm Bureau do support the $20 million allocation 506 for private landowners using groundwater for their drinking water reverse osmosis machines.
Mm-hmm.
You go on to say you support Governor Pillen's $1 million to study the nitrates in drinking water. There's not one part of this testimony that's neutral. It's all in support of the bill. Why didn't you come in support?
Well, again, the $20 million was in support of a portion of the bill, not the large majority of the bill. The $1 million is in the governor's budget. That is in the governor's budget, not the large part of LB 506.
All right, so if we totally disregard this bill, we don't advance this bill at all, are you okay with that?
We are in a neutral capacity on this bill, and we're representing our members.
Then what about your statements about supporting the osmosis?
We would love support for the osmosis. There are other bills out there to support reverse osmosis as well. And we wanted to support and thank the senator for his efforts. Again, we are neither for nor against incapacity for the large majority of the bill.
I think you made my point. You're in the wrong position. You need to be in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator Bostar, welcome to close.
Thank you, Chairman Clements and members of the committee. I don't know why anyone comes in here neutral.
I don't either.
I appreciate your time listening to this. And Senator Erdman, I was surprised as well to hear about how the water rights are actually structured. I was always sort of under the impression that it was first in time, first in right. But then in working on this project, learning that actually that's only true with like users. So if it's an ag right versus an ag right, then that would be the case. Time would mean everything. But when it's unlike users, then that really matters. And so my understanding is if it's, municipal, residential, essentially consumption water is superior rights to all ag rights, regardless of time. And then interestingly, ag rights are superior to all manufacturing rights, regardless of time. So it's the fascinating provisions that we have. But I think that lends itself to why this is also important. And it's been said, and I apologize, repeat something, and I will say it again, though. What we're talking about is Lincoln's water rights, so they're superior to all ag, but the scope of the area of irrigators is huge. It's because it's not just if you are pulling from the Platte River. Effectively, it's if you are in the Platte River watershed, you are subject to this. You could be shut off. If we got to a point where Lincoln's water supply became imperiled. And, I certainly don't have to tell really anyone on this committee this, but we must not let that happen. Essentially at all costs. We can't afford as a state to have our cities shutting down irrigation and agriculture from the Missouri River to the Wyoming border, because that's what could happen. This bill is about the entire state of Nebraska. The funding requested is a fraction of what will have to be spent to do this, and it will take a long time. But based on the timelines that exist, if we don't start now, I'm very concerned for the future. That's also one of the benefits of the ARPA funding. Because if you'll recall, all of the money requested here is federal funds. One of the benefits of that is that money comes with a clock. It has to be spent by 2026, which means for everyone involved, we can't kick the can down the road. We'd have to start in earnest building this, getting access to a second water source so that we don't run out of time and end up doing irreparable damage to agriculture across the state. For those reasons, I implore you to consider this and support it, and I'd be happy to answer any final questions.
Senator Armendariz?
Thank you. Since I'm new to the whole water rights thing, give me a scenario where Lincoln would have to exercise those water rights. To what does that look like for agriculture? Would it just limit them watering their crops, or what does it do for animals? What does it do for the people living on the farm? If Lincoln were to exercise those rights, how long in that scenario, would that last before you lifted those restrictions on ag?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, some of the details I'm not going to necessarily be familiar with, right? But in broad strokes, if Lincoln didn't have enough water to supply its population, which has happened before, and Lincoln has then put restrictions on water access internally when that's happened. But let's say you're talking about, a serious drought. I want to be clear, we've gotten close to this already. It's scary. But in a scenario where, let's say, some of our wells get knocked out, which has happened, it happened in 2019, or we have a drought where, frankly, the Platte River just isn't producing, or the snowpack in the Rockies, which supply it, just wasn't there. If that goes for long enough, then Lincoln could execute a call on the river, and yes, effectively shut down ag. And by ag, it's agriculture in general. So that's crops, that's animals.
They
Not
would take all the water from the animals and the people living on the farm?
Look, I think that not necessarily people, but as far as what is available, as far as the rights, yes, they could shut down the water access for crops and irrigation, agriculture supply. Agriculture in general, as a category, is a lower tier right in water than municipal, residential consumption. And clearly, we don't want that to happen.
And then would you limit the water also in Lincoln
Well,
when that's happening?
for starters, it's not up to me,
Yeah,
to be clear.
scenario. This
I
is a
don't get to
scenario.
make
What does
these
that look
decisions. But I think what we want to be careful about is ultimately the people who will be the ones to decide this, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, are politicians. And so if you're, and I want to be very clear, I'm speaking about a hypothetical. If you're a hypothetical mayor of a city and your city is struggling because it doesn't have access to water, you are going to try to do some things to address that internally. But if you can shut down someone else's water to make sure your constituents have it, I don't think it's unreasonable to imagine that happening as a hypothetical. And that's why we need to avoid getting to this place. That's why we need to do this.
Are there other questions, Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Thank you, Senator Bostar. So let me ask you may not know the answer to this.
Sure.
But let's say that Lincoln and Grand Island are both in need of water. Lincoln having far greater population, would they have seniority over Grand Island?
I think that would probably come down to time of rights and when particular wells were put in. I will double check and get back to you on that. That's my initial thought.
The other thing, it says in here that this would be available to city to primary class. If I remember correctly, I think a primary class is 100,000 to 300,000. Why didn't you just put Lincoln?
Well, that's special legislation, Senator. We can't do that. Let's see.
Okay.
Other questions? Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Chairman Clements. Senator Bostar, thank you for your work on this. And I know through our discussions and all the time you've put in, you've definitely looked at solving the Lincoln water issue. But at the same time, every discussion we've had, you've talked about how it can help the whole state.
Yes.
And I'm sorry I missed some of your opening, which I believe you might have touched on that. The tipping point is when? 2048, this problem has to be solved. What is the time frame? Is it 3 years? Is it 2 years? Is it 4 years? I mean, what is the start dead where we have to get started?
I mean, honestly, in the next couple of years. 2048 is our best guess for when effectively we do not have enough water. But when we're talking about not having enough water for a city, that could come 18 months sooner. And this will take up to 20 years to complete, which is why it's imperative that we do this. And there was also permits were brought up. We, in working out, I apologize, I'm now sort of answering a different question that was asked. I just sort of recall. In making our recommendations, we did speak to water attorneys and experts on permitting. And we have every confident that we have the ability to gain the permits necessary. I believe it would take something from the Corps, but I will also double check that. I just didn't want to let that question go unanswered. But yes, when do we need to start? Now. The sooner we start, the more confidence we can all have that we will avoid getting to a position where awful choices have to be made.
No other questions? I've got a couple. So we have a Perkins Canal project. Is Lincoln's priority above Colorado's?
No.
Okay.
I wish it was.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be very
Just
convenient.
have them release water for us. There was a study of $20 million funding for a study, was that right?
Yes, studying and different analysis and assessments. I can get you a breakdown for all of that.
Has that all been spent?
I think it's all accounted for. I'm not sure all of it's gone out, but effectively, yes.
Obligated?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, all right. And these water rights, are they in the Nebraska Constitution? Is that what
Yes.
you keep referring to?
Yes.
All right.
I believe, actually,
I inferred that, and I wasn't sure.
I think Article 15, Section 6.
Okay.
Hopefully that's correct.
Are there other questions? Seeing none,
Thank you all.
thank you. We have position comments for the record. We have on LB 506, 19 proponents, no opponents, and 1 in the neutral capacity. That concludes LB 506. We will now open a hearing for LB 768. Let's just wait a second for the room to clear. For a minute.
There was a guy that came in, just 10 miles up a tributary, came into the Blue River. He got the.
You got any neutral?
No, that was not it. That was just support allowed. Oh, did you ask him if he has any neutral? The Blue River.
Constitution.
And then he also has a summer. He irrigated twice. So, I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think any house there's certain things that.
All right, we'll now open the hearing for LB 768. Welcome Senator DeKay.
Thank you. I know I stand between you and the end of the day, so I'm going to keep my opening remarks to 40 minutes or so. Good afternoon, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Barry DeKay, spelled Barrydee, capital Kay. I represent District 40 in Northeast Nebraska, and I'm here to introduce LB 768, which is also my priority bill for this session. LB 768 asks for a one-time cash reserve transfer of $30 million to the Critical Infrastructure Facilities Fund in the Department of Natural Resources to fund a critical and growing concern for access to safe water for residents, farmers, and tourists in my rural district in Northeast Nebraska. For those of you not familiar with my district, we are fortunate to have a great mix of breathtaking natural landscapes and productive agricultural land. We are also home to the state's second largest reservoir, Lewis and Clark Lake and Niobrara State Park, both located on the Nebraska-South Dakota border. The area, according to South Dakota tourism numbers, draws over 2 million visitors a year. Hunting, fishing, biking, camping, boating, and horseback riding are just a few of the activities keeping people coming back. We are also seeing an increase in new families moving into the area, in part because they can work from anywhere, but mainly because they love Nebraska and want to be closer to family and recreational opportunities. It's a win-win situation for our area and the entire state. Senator Clements, McDonald, and Wishart, as members of the Special Star Wars Committee, I know that you have seen firsthand how beautiful the area is and understand its potential. Thank you for visiting us and for investing in us. Rural Nebraska often feels left out. I'm here to tell you we will not let you down. We thank you for including us in part of your vision, and we are working hard to ensure our children and our grandchildren have the opportunities to stay in rural Nebraska. And that is why I'm here. Senator Tim Greigert had a similar request last year involving $32 million for our rural water project. For those of you on the committee last year, you might recall it was part of the governor's budget package. But with all the competing requests for dollars, we were grateful to receive $7 million. As new senator for District 40, I can tell you the water project is still the most critical issue facing my district, and that is why I'm here. At the time we drafted this bill, we were told there were no additional ARPA dollars available. We are open to whatever options or packages you might determine are feasible. I did want the committee to know that I do have an amendment that is being passed out, which would address the concerns raised by the fiscal office by clarifying rural water projects are eligible use of the Critical Infrastructure Facilities Fund. I would be happy to work with the committee and Director Riley to tighten up the language. I know there are many important water proposals in front of this committee. Whatever the path forward, I hope this rural water project can be included. In my view, and as you balance all the difficult requests before you, the quality and quantity of water is the most critical issue facing Nebraska, second only to the retention and attraction of people. Both must be addressed if we are to remain viable in the future. Today, you will hear about rural water project that currently serves over 7,000 users, involves over 400 miles of pipe, and spans over 40 miles. The current water treatment plant has outlived its useful life. It is costly to operate, and the intake structure in the lake is facing issues due to sedimentation. Why this project? Given the other priorities in front of you, first and foremost, this ask is about providing access to safe drinking water for current users on rural water system. The current system has reached its maximum output in some location, and there is a waiting list to connect to the system. If another flooding event happens, the entire system is at risk of not being able to supply all the connections. Current users are already paying some of the highest rates in the state. Water bills run almost $90 a month for a family of 5. Depending on usage, those prices can be upward to $200 a month or more. Knox County, specifically along Lewis and Clark Lake, has been designated by Nebraska Forest System Service as one of the highest risk areas in the state for a serious wildfire due to the density of the trees. The rural fire department in the area relies on the rural water system to supply water to their firehouse and has been looking at options to put facilities by the lake to help address and prepare for this risk. Frankly, it isn't a matter of if it happens, but when. And it would be a disaster for Knox County given the property taxes paid by owners of homes and property along the lake. Nebraska Game and Parks Commission submitted a letter in support of this request. As you are aware, their agency has some exciting development plans in the works, but right now there's not enough water hookups to serve any growth. As most of you know, my livelihood is in agriculture. Water is our lifeblood. It is critical we have safe drinking water for our residents and that our farmers and ranchers have the water they need for their crops and livestock. I can promise you I would never introduce a bill I felt would jeopardize the way of life in my district. We must work together, and I ask for your help. I want to thank Senators Dover, Wishart, Slama, and Brewer for signing on to this legislation. I am open to the best path to ensure the important rural water project be included. I would be happy to try to answer any of your questions.
Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. So, Senator DeKay, this map here, that you show here, all people in that area are on the public water?
All the people that can be on that map, there are private wells in that area that aren't hooked up right now. And that is part of why we were here. We're trying to make sure that with this project going forward that private wells aren't going to be affected. The studies are being done, but that is the outline of the map for the current Cedar Knox Rural Water District.
This is the way it is today.
Yeah.
And there are some people who have their own private wells.
Absolutely.
Is it possible the city could drill a well?
Is it possible?
The city could drill a well rather than draw the water out of the river?
That is part of the reason for this project. There's going to be new wells put down because of sedimentation from the previous floods in 1912 and whatever. Those, the sedimentation, those intake lines are very close to being covered up. The well house has outlived its useful potential without millions of dollars of upgrades. This would give us a source to be able to get groundwater that has less chemical impact to meet the levels of safe drinking water, and it would be groundwater over surface water.
Do you know what your nitrates are in your groundwater?
Nitrates all over the state are impacted differently. The state is a patchwork of parts per million. This would help go deep enough that nitrates aren't going to be, as far as I know right now, there's still testing being done, but we're going to be assured that nitrates aren't going to be a problem going forward. That's why continuing testing is taking place at this time.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Bushy.
Senator Gregor, thank you for.
You said.
I'm thinking about his legislation.
Thank you for the compliment.
Senator DeKay, you're picking up this legislation from Senator Gregor last year, and I believe that you designated this your priority bill.
Yes.
Can you talk about why this is such a priority for you and the constituents that you represent?
It represents Northeast Nebraska. It represents, and it's water, as you've heard from a lot of different entities here, water is critical. The quantity and quality of water in the state of Nebraska is critical going forward. With this project, it does help give us the chance to have safe drinking water, and we will continue to work to make sure we have safe private wells that are able to run irrigation systems to water livestock with, but it also opens up the opportunity to the Star Wars project in conjunction with the Game and Parks to add more opportunities for tourism in the state of Nebraska and Northeast Nebraska. So, and it does expand with the map that you saw, it does expand the scope of the water district. So that is why it's almost imperative to have a complete overhaul on this current system.
Other questions? Seeing none, we will welcome proponents.
Thank you.
First proponent for LB 768. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Annette Sudbeck, ANNETTESUDBECK, and I am the manager of the Lewis and Clark Natural Resources District, which encompasses the eastern half of Knox County and the majority of Cedar and Dixon counties in northeast Nebraska. I'm providing testimony on behalf of the Lewis and Clark NRD and the Nebraska Association of Resources Districts. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of LB 768 to allocate $30 million from the Cash Reserve Fund to the Critical Infrastructure Facilities Cash Fund in support of the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project and much needed changes to update the system, including changing the source water and completing system upgrades to allow continued service for the current and future customers. Thank you also to Senator DeKay for his dedication to District 40 and his understanding of this critical need for the project in Northeast Nebraska. I also want to say thank you to the 2022 committee that provided support of the project through the generous appropriation of $7 million in ARPA funds. Those funds are being put to use right now in getting the project rolling. Test wells are planned for the spring and summer we've had nitrate tests at about 3 to 4 parts per million in our sites. And we are doing test pumping to make sure the quality and quantity are there that we need. We've done initial testing, but we want to do much more detailed testing. The engineering to change water sources will enter the final design phase once we are completed with that. We have been able to secure additional funds for the project, including $8.4 million in water sustainability funding from the Department of Natural Resources, which requires a $5.6 million local match. In the last year, the cost of the planned project has increased dramatically due to crazy price increases impacting projects across the state and country. We are anticipating the project to cost nearly double what was estimated initially, and the match for that will come directly from customer charges that will be financed through a state revolving loan fund, or the fund loan. If we are able to secure an additional 20 to 30 million to support the project, we would be able to realize completion and secure service for the long term. 30 million would be ideal to ensure without fail that we are able to complete all planned project components. However, 20 million would get us to the point where we could make some hard decisions if necessary to postpone some improvements till later. CKRWP provides drinking water in northern Cedar and Knox counties. In an area of the state where locating groundwater resources of quality and quantity suitable for drinking can be difficult. And that's the main reason why we have a rural water district there. We currently treat surface water to provide that drinking water, in part because of the difficulty in locating a groundwater source in sufficient quality and quantity. This project, or the project goal, is to develop a groundwater well field, replace the undersized, outdated treatment plant in a more accessible area, and replace portions of the distribution system that are undersized. The well field will not only eliminate the concerns of sediment overtaking the intake structure, but also reduce organics and water to drastically lower disinfection byproducts and bring the project back into compliance with EPA requirements. The new treatment plant would be designed to remove hardness, total dissolved solids, manganese, and if necessary, have the ability to include nitrate removal. If the groundwater source proves not to be the right solution for the project, CKRWP, or the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project, could look to Yankton, South Dakota to provide drinking water. Connecting to Yankton has been investigated, but was not selected as a preferred solution because the cost to customers over time will be more than developing a groundwater source. The NRD has been working hard to explore all options and costs, both in the short term and for the long term, or the long haul. The planning process has been very long, and we are now in the process of sharing all the findings with community members and seeking input, so the right solution can be executed. I want you to know that there are people here that will oppose this request. The NRD understands their concerns, and we are working hard to bring forth more information and gain more input to ensure everyone is informed on the options that have been researched and the associated costs. Thank you for your time today. There are many important needs in the state. Water is most definitely one of them. I hope you will help us find a way to secure funding and ultimately a long-term solution for residents in Northeast Nebraska.
Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next proponent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Don Blankenau, D-O-N-B-L-A-N-K-E-N-A-U, and I'm a Lincoln lawyer representing the Lewis and Clark Natural Resources District. I've been involved in a variety of water issues across Nebraska and the United States, and I offer support to this legislation. As you heard, like many water suppliers across Nebraska, the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project, through its sponsor, the NRD, is exploring multiple options to meet existing and future demand for sources of potable water. Unfortunately, high-quality water in the Lewis and Clark NRD is not readily available. State and federal water quality standards limit the existing supplies that can be used without significant treatment costs. And compounding that limitation is the desire to minimize conflicts with existing users. These factors converge to require more extensive infrastructure at even higher costs. Further exacerbating these costs are supply chain constraints that have driven up costs for such projects all across the United States. And as a result, serving the essential needs of rural Nebraskans has never been more difficult nor more costly. Sensitive to the need to protect the interests of all of its constituents, the Lewis and Clark NRD has attempted to deal with these development challenges by exploring multiple options. Those options, as you heard from Ms. Sudbeck, include but aren't limited to the development of a well field to utilize groundwater and entering into a contract with Yankton, South Dakota for water service. In Nebraska, groundwater has historically been the preferred option for most public water suppliers due to its wide availability and good quality. While groundwater remains plentiful in Nebraska, meeting water quality standards requires a great deal of investment. While water service provided by the city of Yankton also remains an option, it would be limited by the terms of a negotiated contract. And reliance on a contractual relationship with a city located in another state to provide an essential service always carries with it some noteworthy risk and cost. Nevertheless, Lewis and Clark NRD is weighing all of those factors to find the best long-term solution for its people. But no matter which option the NRD ultimately selects, the cost to rural Nebraskans served by the project will be significant. Protecting rural Nebraska requires a commitment from this body for all water projects. And simply put, protecting and growing all parts of Nebraska requires an investment in all parts of Nebraska. For that reason, the Lewis and Clark NRD asks that you advance this legislation. That concludes my testimony, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Other questions? Senator McDonald?
Thank you for being here. I noticed you were here earlier under Senator Bostar's bill, and you have your 30 years of experience across the country in water law. What is your opinion of the basically a city versus agriculture?
Well, what you heard in the prior bill, I want to be a little cautious with because I heard things about water law I did not know. I will say that what that bill dealt with was surface water rights, which is under the Nebraska Constitution adopted in 1920. The organic law itself was adopted in 1895. And that's the first in time, first in right system, which applies only to surface water. So it's a very different animal than what we're seeing here in the groundwater context. All right. So the Nebraska Constitution with respect to surface water lists 3 preferences. And those are in order: domestic uses, agricultural uses, and manufacturing. So if you have a priority date under a water right, your priority date always rules. You always get the water relative to anyone who's junior and upstream of you. However, you can exercise that preference against that upstream user, but there's a catch. You always have to pay just compensation to that individual. So for instance, the city of Lincoln, were they to exercise their surface water right, for everyone upstream who had a senior right, which is by far most of them, they would have to pay just compensation. So in their instance, to exercise that right to actually get water would be enormously expensive for the city. In this instance, if the NRD were to locate its well field with Yankton, which would be more of a surface water right, they would be subject to South Dakota law, which is generally the same thing. It's a first in time, first right system as well. Groundwater is very different though. That has the same preferences, but it is not a first in time, first in right system. So if you're an individual landowner with a domestic well, that is to serve your household, you would have just as much right as a municipal, or in this case, a rural water supplier would be providing for the same purpose. It's a long way of answering your question, but
thank you.
Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Crummins. Thank you for being here. I guess maybe I could ask Senator DeKay too, but currently it looks like, are you pumping any water out of the lake, or is this all going to be a well field or a new well field, or talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm not the greatest person to answer that. But what I understand about the system is that the NRD is presently not decided on a particular system yet. It's looking at and probably prefers a groundwater option, but it is not yet done discussing it with Yankton, South Dakota, or looking at any other options that might exist.
My question being is, can't we take the water out of our side of the lake? No,
Okay. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Are there other proponents for LB 768? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Russell Schmidt, spelled RussellSchmidt. I would like to thank you for taking the time to listen to our proposal, and thank you for allowing me to testify today in support of LB 768. Knowing how this small project has kept me up at night, I'm aware of the awesome responsibilities you have for the entire state budget. I would also like to thank Senator DeKay for introducing this important legislation. Water issues are not easy, and we appreciate Senator DeKay's leadership and his willingness to be involved. I am a husband, a father, a farmer, and an irrigator. So water is a major part of my summer operation. I am also a member of the Lewis and Clark NRD and the board of directors. The amount I have learned since being on the board of groundwater is substantial. Things I never heard or thought about. If a person comes to a board with the mind made up and not willing to look at new information and change their mind, then perhaps they should reconsider the reason they're on the board. This has made me look not only at the water I use on my small farm, but also at the whole NRD and in turn all of Nebraska. As a board, we are constantly trying to update and better understand the water situation in the NRD. With that, the Cedar Knox water supply is in jeopardy. Having found, hopefully, an abundant supply of water, we are now asking for the chance to develop and bring this source of water to the users of the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project. The next and most important step is financing. It is why we need your help. It is why we drove 3 hours today to attend this meeting. Some had voiced concern about the water supply and the amount we would draw. We have listened to the concerns and continue to study and research the quantity and quality of the water. We are sincere, and the last thing we would want to do is affect the water usage in the area. The project will use approximately 152 million gallons of water per year. I know that sounds like a lot, but it is the equivalent of what 4 or 5 irrigation systems over the course of 1 year would use, or the equivalent of about 20,000 head feedlot uses in a year. The Cedar Knox Rural Water Project's ability to provide clean drinking water within its service area have been and continues to be instrumental in the current and future development of the region. It is an important way of life. It is important to my farm and my family, and it is critically important to the current future growth of Northeast Nebraska. While trying to take the concerns of the neighbors and residents into account and answering the questions posed, there are a few who have made up their minds to oppose no matter what the evidence is given to them. We want to reassure our friends and neighbors we do not want to affect anyone in a negative way. And if studies find we will, the project will take a different approach. Once again, thank you for your time. We at Lewis and Clark NRD thank you, and we greatly appreciate the time this committee puts into the job serving all of Nebraska. And maybe when this is accomplished, we can work on something really important, like getting the Huskers to a bowl game. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions, unless it's about the bowl game.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Are there additional proponents? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairs Clements and the members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Matt Wynant, spelled M-A-T-T-W-E-I-N-A-N-D-T. I am a third generation diversified farmer and custom operator in northern Cedar County near Wynot, Nebraska. I farm with my wife and my family. I'm in support of LB 768, and I'm grateful to Senator Barry DeKay for bringing this to our attention and this important matter. As a background, I'm in my 9th year as a director on the Lewis and Clark NRD. And before that amount of time, I had no idea what the NRDs even did. Got tired of church and school boards, so I went to something that was a little bit more in my field. I'm currently the sitting chair. I've also been a representative for the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project Advisory Board, which is underneath the guidance of the Lewis Clark NRD. We own that system up there. I truly believe that we have positive progress in mind. We've invested 7 years of research, starting in our first Bartlett and West engineering portfolio was in 2016. Seems like we've been at this forever. Anyway, we've researched several locations for groundwater and approximately $600,000 in expenses with different engineering firms and other experts so that we do not negatively affect other people or other water sources. My family's property sits between the hills of the Missouri River and the Bow Creek tributaries in northeast Nebraska. We are blessed with the different variations of aquifers. They're confined, they're unconfined, a variety of minerals and qualities. At our place on my farm, we have 2 water sources. One's a 520-foot well. It's in the Missouri River alluvium, and it is very hard water, but it's a very good source of quantity. We also have a 36-foot deep surface well water that's somewhat high in nitrates and not necessarily suitable for human consumption. Both are useful for livestock, but not so good for human consumption. As a teenager in the early 80s, my father wisely had an opportunity to hook onto a safe, reliable water source, knowing that our deep well was already 40 to 50 years old. He told me that as far as the reliable and safe drinking water to our house, we would also have a backup in case we had other issues with livestock, which did happen in 2005. I had to dig another well. And so it was a fantastic source, but not to waste it. We only use it in our drinking water sources in our house. It was a very healthy source, and it was known as the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project, which at that time was owned and managed by Lewis and Clark NRD and still is. And at that time, I didn't know anything about it, but as an adult with a wife, children, and now grandchildren, we have been using this well-managed utility for nearly 40 years. The lifetime of this repurposed facility, which was the old Devil's Nest, that was a defunct recreational area. The forefathers to our system thought that they could use this, and they've used it very well over the time. Now it is time to provide a safe and reliable source for my grandchildren and the whole economic future of northern Knox and Cedar counties, and we would greatly appreciate your support for Barry DeKay's, Senator DeKay's LB 768. Thank you for your consideration, and I'll be happy to answer questions if I can.
Are there questions of the committee? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. I don't have a question, but I have a statement. You have very good basketball teams at Wynot.
Yes, we do. Those young coaches have been really leaders in their community, and they're just as good off the field. They've done a great job for us. Thank you.
Others? Seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank
you. Are there additional proponents on LB 768? If you're planning to testify, I'd appreciate it if you come to the front seats. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Brad Wilkin, BRADWILKEN. As concerned residents and farmers in northeast Nebraska, I'm in favor of the funding towards the Cedar Knox Water Rule Project as proposed by the LC NRD. But I expressed our opposition to the proposed well field option for the Dolphin Aquifer location for this proposed project. We have serious reservations about the preferred Dolphin Aquifer plan, its potential risks and impacts on our community. We strongly believe that the Dolphin Aquifer option will cost significantly more and put greater area of risk and negative impacts compared to.
May I interrupt you?
Yep.
Are you in opposition to the bill,
I am not. I am for the funding for Northeast Nebraska.
to the funding? Oh,
Correct. That's what the bill is for.
all right.
So,
I
I
was
guess,
sounding kind of negative.
yeah. So I guess my main thing is this. There's been multiple options for water in Northeast Nebraska, river or groundwater aquifer. For instances that came up in earlier conversations too as well, groundwater is preferred. However, the communication to the community for the farmers has not been the best. So if we hear options like this one's more expensive than this option, but really what is that expensive? What is that rate at? Because it might be more expensive, but at the cost of what? Is it the cost of regular farmers and residents in the area? There's multi-generational farms all in the Knox County Cedar area. There's a lot of shallow wells. People are already affected by a minimal amount of groundwater, a level change. So I guess the one thing
Well, you're for the funding, but the bill probably doesn't specify how the
It
water's
does not.
going to be delivered.
Correct.
Okay, continue.
So as far as allocation for the taxpayer dollars for a project like this, I want to just make sure that whatever project goes forward with it is most cost effective. One of the preferred plans that was introduced from a public meeting was for a well field within this Dolphin Aquifer. This well field would then pump water 20 miles up north to the river where the existing plant is, and then out to the existing channels for the community. That seems like a pretty high dollar amount for those tax dollars to go to. However, without knowing exactly what those numbers are for all 5 options they presented, the Yankton, the Ayton, the Dolphin, and then also the last 2 were Dolphin. And then just redoing, revamping the existing one, and then also proposing a new water treatment facility on the river too as well. So with that being said, that 20-mile pipe would need to go across a lot of environmental aspects of it. There's going to be easements going through there, land acquisitions potentially too as well. And not only that for the cost, but please consider the cost of the residents in that area for mitigation of their existing well service in area. And as we heard earlier too as well, it is priority. Ag is going to get secondary to it. So if this water does go up to have municipal and then also recreational, and the farmers do have a potential of getting shut down, that will negatively impact the entire area. So my main thing is make sure we're diligent on the studies, make sure we're looking at all the impacts, not just the impact of conducting the construction of these proposed plans, but also what the risks are factored into and what that risk would be to the residents and farmers in the location.
Very good. Other questions? Seeing none,
Thank you very much.
for your testimony. Next proponent for LB 17. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Rita Wilken, RITA WILKEN, and I am in opposition of this project. I live right in between the 2 wells. I have lived there for 45 years.
Excuse me. I was asking, is there anyone else who is a proponent? Raise your hand.
Oh, okay.
Who supports this bill?
Seeing none, we will open it now for opposition.
Yes, I am opponent.
All right. You may begin then.
Okay. I have lived in between these 2 quality well source sites for 45 years on our family farm. As you deliberate your support for the Cedar Knox Rural Water Project, please consider that this location for the well source is not the best location for this project. The area where this groundwater source is being proposed is designated as livestock friendly. The immediate area of one of the proposed groundwater wells neighbors the largest cattle feeding yard business in Knox County, as the feed yards are all within 3 miles of one of the proposed quality source wells. 2 operating hog confinements, as well as a chicken egg-laying confinement farm, are all within miles of both of the proposed well sites. Our well that lies between these 2 well sites was tested for nitrates, high in nitrates, as you'll see in one of the letters that you got, back in March 15th, 2022. The well that tested high in nitrates is 2 miles north of one of the proposed groundwater sites, and the other groundwater well source is within 3 miles of it. The UNL chemigation test instructor, which was provided by the NRD, who has to give chemigation tests to my husband, in January in Norfolk of 2023, he stated that nitrates can travel miles and eventually contaminate clean water wells. So eventually, if they're going to dig one of these quality wells that they're going to say it's free of nitrates, eventually all the other nitrates from these neighboring wells will be pulled into this well. As if you would look in your papers, Nebraska's nitrate problems growing worse. You all have a copy. If you have time to read it, I would appreciate it. It talks about the communities in Nebraska whose public water systems have violated that standard at least since 2010. They cannot compete. They cannot clear the nitrates out of water. That's why every time you hear like the communities have to boil their water, they cannot get the nitrates out. So eventually, this is what will happen with this project. People will be paying for water that they're still going to have to boil. This area borders the Missouri River. The Missouri River is shared by Nebraska and South Dakota. Well, then let's utilize it instead of taking it out of our agriculture land. Nebraska can utilize that river. Bonhomme County in South Dakota has it figured out. Yankton, South Dakota has it figured out. Yankton, South Dakota can produce 24 million gallons a day. Several of us visited that water plant, and they said they would gladly sell water to Nebraska, and the more water that they could sell, the more water they could flush clean. This water from these wells is going to be pumped 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Area farmers are concerned there will be in years to come farm wells going dry, water springs and running streams that supply farm dams for livestock will dry up. Wetlands used by waterfowl and pheasants will no longer exist. We were invited to NRD meetings to come and find out what they were proposing in our area, which we did. And after we expressed our concerns, one of the NRD members said to us, now we've all spent too much time and money in this project for you people to come here tonight. By the time you will see all the effects of this, I'll be dead and gone, and so will you. There has been a lack of communication with area landowners. Many area farmers don't know about these groundwater wells, including the proposed pipeline route that will be tearing up our farms, tearing up our topsoils that we have worked on for years.
Your time is up.
When they dig pipelines to pipe the water across our farmlands, when these wells are dug, there will be pipelines that will go across our farm ground to pipe this water to their water treatment plant.
And it's been mentioned, and that's the end of your time. Thank you for your testimony.
Yes. Well,
Are there any questions from the committee?
I'm sorry, I have lots more, but you have things to read in there.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next opponent. Welcome.
My name is Craig Wilkin, and thank you very much for hearing me. Craig is C-R-A-I-G, Wilkin is W-I-L-K-E-N. I represent the farmers and ranchers and neighbors that surround me in Dolphin Township and the neighborings on the outside. That's who I represent. I have lived in between the two well sites that are proposed. One is the 2 miles to the south of me, and the other one's 3.5 miles west. I've lived there all my life. And I've been attending the board meetings, rural water and the NRD. But to go back to May of 2022, we actually were, I'm close to the well site, so I've had a moratorium on 2021 and 2022 of 1,000 feet of staying away from digging any wells because they put this moratorium on me because my land's too close. Didn't interfere. It's just that's why I was notified about what this project was going to do. Okay. And at this meeting, when they approached us, they said anytime you needed any questions and answers. Okay. My strenuous opponent was trying to find out how much water they were going to use. I stressed that several times over. And I had my doubts, why aren't they coming up with this figure? So I kept asking, how many million gallons of water are you going to do this? What's going to be the max for all these years they're going to do this? Okay. I asked that at a rural water board meeting and an NRD meeting, all within a week and a half of when our supervisors met in Center, Nebraska on July 28th. And upon that day, I just had asked this a week and a half ago. And then they magically come up and said 1.5 million gallons of water a day. Okay? And then later on, of March 8th of 2023, just last week, then I find out that the Bartlett West, LRE, and Water, they had this information already in December of 2021. I can understand some lacks of not telling me, but why wasn't I? Why when I made this simple question the day before, the week before, and they would not answer? So I have my doubts when they're not forthcoming with the information that I asked for. On the well fields. I'm 66 years old. I seen the irrigation go in the early 70s in my area. Seen a lot of well drilling. And the information that I received in the early 70s of which way the flow of water is coming out of these well fields is completely different than what Bartlett and West came up with. Okay? And that's another reason why I'm opponent of this, because I don't quite believe all the information they're giving me. Okay? They could say it, and I got different things. When I ask about the direction of the water flow. The other thing is Crofton, Nebraska. 4 miles south of Crofton, Nebraska, there was a well field there that supplied Crofton, Nebraska with water early in the 70s. And the reason why they had to stop because the nitrates got too high. That well field is only 4 miles away from the one well field to the south of me. That's only 4 miles away. And they had to shut that site down because of the high nitrates. Yes, I'm against the proposed well field in Dolphin Township. I'm opposed to it. But I got alternatives here of the Yankton uses, the NRD from the water source options. Yankton uses the Lane Rainey collector well switch, use lateral well screens to extract the water from the aquifer, which direction connects to the surface water, in the river or underneath the lake. The city of Yankton has the ability to produce 24 million gallons of treated water a day. Currently, they're using 3 to 7 million gallons a day. So they're disclosing that the Lewis and Clark needs could be met quite easily. We're blessed with the Missouri River. It's a great water source. Another treatment plant was the Yankton Bonhomme Water District. They're utilizing surface water that's coming out of the dam.
Excuse me. Your time is up. Could you wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm just saying the Bonhomme Water District has like 10 towns on it, and they're using the surface water out of there.
All right.
And thank you very much for the time you gave me. I appreciate it, you guys.
Thank you for coming.
You bet.
Next opponent.
I am Evelyn Hennings. I am from Crofton, Nebraska. I have 2 quarters that connect to the well site. I also live in Crofton, Nebraska for about the last 10, 12
Could you
years.
spell your name, please?
Evelyn, Evelyn, Hennings, Henninges.
Thank you.
I am here. I'm going to speak from my heart. I'm not a speaker. I never wrote anything down, but I am opposed to this project. We were told in NRD that Lewis and Clark Water Project is not being funded by taxpayers' money. I don't know what the tax reserve fund is, where that money comes from, but if it comes from the taxpayers, then that is out of line. We were told at a meeting that if the water level went low, that irrigators may be shut off, but Lewis and Clark Water Project would continue to pump 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I don't know how far that would extend as far as irrigators are concerned, if it would be all Nebraska, be our little area right there, or if it would extend miles. To be fair, I don't know. We were never informed that this was starting this project. We got a letter in the mail, 6 landowners that connect to this well site. We got a letter one day in the mail, but it was also publicized as a legal notice in the paper the same day. So we were not notified any sooner than the public was. We did ask why it was kept a secret, and they said it wasn't their intent to be. We also, Knox County Supervisors Board did not know anything about it. 2 out of the 7 knew something about it, but otherwise it was a secret, and that's why they presented this meeting in center at the courthouse, which was attended about by 85 concerned citizens. NRD did speak. People did also speak. We're trying to do everything we can. They have a settlement problem. It could very well be in the Missouri River. Springfield doesn't seem to have it. Yankton doesn't seem to have it. Vermillion doesn't seem to have it. And Vermillion pipes water to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So why is Northeast Nebraska letting Missouri water go down the river and letting some other states use it? But yet they're taking water from the agricultural land. Nebraska is supposed to be an agricultural state. Are we now going to be called an ag state, or are we going to be called Nebraska Tourism and Rec Area? Because now we're going to pump water south of Crofton, 8 miles, 7 miles to the river, where right now we're getting water from the river and pumping to Crofton, etc. Doesn't make sense. We're going in the opposite direction. And thank you for listening to me.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next testifier. Good afternoon.
My name is Patricia Kronberg, Patricia, Kronberg. I know how old the treatment plant is in the Devil's Nest because I used to run down there all the time and go swimming. And I also worked down there when the plant went in, helping serve lunch. So it's old. But anyway, I am totally against this. My whole family is totally against us. The NRD came to us after the helicopter went over our place. And my husband said no. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't take water away from our neighbors. No way. So, but anyway, I am 1 mile from one of the well sites, proposed well sites. I'm 4.5 miles from the other proposed well site. I am very close to gonna be the big 20,000 head cattle feedlot, and the hog units and stuff. So we also had gotten a letter from the NRD saying that there were high nitrates in our area. So I took it into Bloomfield and I had the NRD in Bloomfield test our water, and it tested 9.6, getting pretty close to borderline drinking. So, and also our renter on the other side of where this well closest to us is, his tests about the same as ours does. So, and we say too, a lot of people have told us, get it through Yankton. If they can provide water for all of us for hundreds of years, why not go with something like that? Or go up closer to the bridge, or, the dam. But I'm trying not to repeat some of the stuff that they said. So, but anyway, our tax money, if they run our well dry, our value of our land is going to go if we have no water. But I'm sure our taxes are still going to go up. The place that we live on has been in my husband's family for 117 years that we can go by. My husband and I have lived on that place for 48 years. So we're thinking about our kids, our grandkids. They always come to Grandpa and Grandma's house to play on the farm. Well, we want to keep it in the family. Our one daughter from Norfolk her and her husband plan on moving there. So I ask, why would you guys, as senators, put one of these wells close to you? And take the water away from the farmers? One of our big area farmers, someone comes to our house and we can't even visit with him in the summertime because his phone is constantly going off with the irrigation systems. Low pressure. This one shut off. Oh, I got to turn this one on because that one's, they're constantly switching. We don't have the water that they need from our area. They need to be looking somewhere else and not in that area. So, but we want to keep this, for our generation to continue our family on that farm. And that's part of their inheritance. So why take it away from our kids and our grandkids?
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next testifier. Anyone else in opposition? Seeing none, is anyone here wanting to testify in the neutral capacity? Seeing none, Senator DeKay, you're welcome to close.
Thank you. As everybody in this room can attest to, water is critical to our state. The quantity of it, the quality of it, and that's what we are trying to work through every one of these water issues that come before this committee and natural resources. When it comes to where the wells are being dug at this time, that is still to be determined. There are going to be public meetings coming forward that will address the needs. There are still options on the table to address those needs, to see what is the best source, not necessarily the cheapest source, but the best source to have sustainable water for everybody, regardless if they're using the rural water district, if they're using their private wells, or if they're irrigating. So those questions are still to be answered. That is part of the reason for the ask for this money. There is a testing will be done. Those tests will continue into April, and we will be having open house meetings after that. As a resident of Knox County and a fourth generation farmer rancher myself, I am currently on a rural water system out of Boyd County, and a member of that system for 30 years. We use it for our home. We use it for some of our livestock, but out in our pastures and stuff, we still use private wells. So there isn't anything that I want to do as a senator that's going to be detrimental to the private wells. I just want to be able to ensure that there are quality and quantity sources of water coming forward. There are, as it was stated, there are economic development factors coming in, as tested to the 20,000 head feedlot being tested as an economic development tool that will be bringing dollars into Northeast Nebraska. There are chicken farms, whatever else that comes in, there are tourism dollars. And to a person here, and myself included, we want to show off Northeast Nebraska for its beauty, not to commercialize it, but show the natural beauty of it. And our water source and our landscapes are very important to me, and I'm sure everybody that has testified here today is very important. Each and every one of us, or nobody would have been here. This is very important. I emphasize that from the beginning to the end of this, that there's still testing to be done. There are still solutions to be made, and nothing has been signed off on for sure. But this project has been appropriated, and the funds have been made available, and this is shovel ready to start, to, if it is approved, to finish up where we started with a ending date, in use date of around 2026. As was a testimony earlier, it's been studied for 6 years, and that doesn't mean that testing is done. It's still part of the process, and I will be asking questions, and I have asked questions to get the most information we can to make the best determination on how we source our water. When it comes to South Dakota, I do agree that right now South Dakota does have the water for us, but as earlier said, South Dakota, if we want to be reliant on our water source for several towns and several miles of people in Nebraska, if they get a grasp of this water system, they can put a stranglehold or whatever they want to start raising water rates. That would be detrimental to everybody in the area. I applaud South Dakota for wanting to do this. I would, if I was in their shoes and had the availability, I would do that too. But at the same time, we just got to be careful, and we got to make sure we get the right source from the right wells or from the right reservoir or wherever, upstream, downstream. But that's why the testing's going on. And I can assure that we will go forward with the best solution for everybody involved in this, whether it's in the Cedar Knox Water District or with private wells. Everybody's needs and everybody's desires are going to be answered before we go forward. So if you have any questions, I'd try to answer them. Otherwise, there are other numbers that could be available going forward.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Lippincott?
I think this was already answered and I probably missed it. Can water be taken out of Lewis and Clark Lake and used, treated?
Water currently for this is being taken out of Lewis and Clark. Sedimentation from the 2019 and from the previous floods in 2012, I think it was, sedimentation is coming down. The Lewis and Clark Reservoir is slowly gravitating. It's out, when they put Lewis and Clark, Gavin's Point Dam in, it had a 50-year life cycle on it. It's already surpassed that. Where I live up in Verdell area, which is from Crofton, is 45 miles east or west. Sedimentation from the Niobrara River, from the backwaters of Lewis and Clark Lake has reached that far west, and it's gradually filling in the backside of that lake approximately 1/4 mile a year. So there is a lot of useful life left in it, but currently where the water lines are at coming out of that, that won't be sustainable in that location.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator.
Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
We have position comments for the record on LB 768. 19 proponents, 9 opponents, none in the neutral capacity. And that concludes the hearing for LB 768. That concludes our hearings today.